Right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to a drizzly day. I hope you all had a decent weekend. We'll start the inquiry again. I've got a couple of housekeeping matters and then we'll see what other housekeeping there may be from others and have a look at the programme. Housekeeping. I doubt that this has gone out yet because I only looked at it yesterday evening. I've had an email in from the Scouts, which I don't think was copied to the parties, but I'm not sure on that. Two things on that. First of all, they asked what the deadline was for an agreed statement on the current position of the Scouts. And I've gone back and said that as we hope to conclude the evidence this week, then the deadline is, deadline is the end of play on Thursday. They also said they're instructing a solicitor to deal with this, which, I mean, they're entitled to do, but it sounds as though it's getting a little bit over the top. I mean, I simply want a position statement, and if it turns out that one side, as it were, the council says one thing and the other side says the other thing, well, fine, that's kind of all I need to know. But anyway, I have told them that an agreed statement by close of play on Thursday. The other thing in that email was some further evidence, a couple of paragraphs worth, which related to noise and tranquility and the issue of shooting and the activities that were mentioned on, whichever day it was. I've not read those paragraphs other than to skip read them, but I've told them that as that matter arose in landscape evidence last week, that I'm not accepting that late evidence because obviously the landscape witnesses aren't here and I'm not inclined to accept late evidence that arose from the landscape. So if parties do see that and hopefully see my response to it, the agreed statement, Thursday, close of play, and the rest of that email I'm not accepting. And as I say, I've glanced at it simply to understand what sort of topic it was covered, but I haven't thought about it at all, and I'm not accepting it. One other housekeeping matter, which is a timetabling thing really, we're sitting, get the days right, today, Wednesday, Thursday. We know that the timetable is tight. Thursday, I need to close the inquiry and be out of the door at 4:30. If I'm not, it means I spend the night on Leeds railway station, which is not something I'm massively keen to do. However, I mean, I'm entirely happy to start half an hour earlier on Thursday and or take a shorter lunch break. Let's have a look at that on Wednesday, but 4:30 is my deadline. I've got to get to the station and get various trains, otherwise I'll be in difficulties. Leaving aside today's evidence, I just want to clarify a couple of things on that. Any other housekeeping matters from anybody?
Sorry, thank you, sir. Just to update you, I think you helpfully gave us your list at the end of last week of things. From the council's view, on the 106, I think we received, I think yesterday evening, from the appellant just some proposed amendments to some aspects, which we'll look at. But that's why you haven't got a sort of an agreed version yet. I think it relates to SANG and maybe some other issues. So that's where we are. Yeah. SIL compliance statement, we're very much hope we're going to get you a draft. If not today, then tomorrow. It's just being looked at to be signed off. So you've got that. And on the Scouts, so thank you for that update. I haven't seen that. I don't think Mr. Johnson's seen the email you're referring to. No doubt it'll make its way to us in due course, and we'll do our best. I mean, Mr. Johnson will speak to his understanding of the Scouts' position when he gives evidence. Yeah. Obviously, from when he gives evidence, I won't be able to talk to him, but I'll find someone behind the scenes to tell me what's going on. We'll do our best to agree something if we possibly can. Landscape and visual tables, I think my learned friend told me that Mr. Smith's very kindly going to draft something which might be with us today, and we'll obviously review that as soon as we can. I don't think, as long as you get that before closing submissions, I think that's probably going to be fine. Yeah. But we'll certainly work behind the scenes on that. And then on conditions, I think we're almost agreed that Mr. Johnson, just one issue which relates to one of the water conditions. He just wants to think about that issue. But I think the upshot from our point of view is if and when we get to conditions, and if we have a very short condition session, it might just be limited to one issue about one condition. And obviously the Rule 6 party may have other issues as well. So I think that's where we are on matters that you raised last week.
Okay, that's useful. I haven't by any means forgotten any of those, but I wasn't chasing those particularly at the moment because I was hoping that hoping they were progressing. Anything from Mr. Sorry, not Mr. Marucci.
Well,
I see
Mr. Ricci.
I see he's been relegated. That's absolutely fine. Anything from the appellant?
So just a couple of other points. I think there's a statement explaining the section 106 in preparation for the appellant, so that'll come in as well. On conditions, there is an agreed statement of common ground with the Rule 6 party in relation to ecology. It's not very extensive, but I think it's useful, and I'm hoping it's being printed and we can give you a signed copy shortly. I'd flag that there are a couple of suggestions in relation to the conditions from the Rule 6 party. So those have been put in the addendum to the statement of common ground.
Okay, that's good.
So you can have a look at those, sir, and we can discuss those in the relevant session. So that might be another point which requires some discussion through the condition section. We've also said there's a few documents that I think all parties have seen and which are to be added to the inquiries in core documents library. They aren't currently on the website, but hopefully will be uploaded shortly. I think they're with the council for uploading. Just running very quickly through them, so if that's helpful. We've got the PPG extracts that we referred to last week in relation to those landscape issues.
Yep.
We've got Mr. Brown's photograph of the appeal site from Gibbet Hill.
Yep.
We've got a Thames Water document about a response to a question from the Rule 6 party, I think, about water deliveries, something of the sort, water outages. There's a bit of email correspondence with Natural England, between EPR and Natural England, so which I'll ask Mr. Jack to talk to in relation to clarifying essentially what their position is in relation to the SANG.
Yeah.
There's a letter from the Forest School inquiry, which you remember said that was the statement that was going to be read out, but they couldn't attend.
Yeah.
And then I think there's a further statement from Mr. Brown from the Rule 6 party in relation to the water interruptions.
Yeah.
So that should be new inquiry documents 1317 to 22.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll keep an eye on those. None of those comes as, I think none of those comes as any surprise to me, but I'll keep an eye on that. Thank you. Anything from you, Mr. Brown? Okay. So today we have Dr. Guest on behalf of the Rule 6 party. And can I just be absolutely clear what we've got? We were hoping, obviously, to have two witnesses from the Rule 6 party, one unfortunately unable to attend. And we have had information as to which parts of, let me just call it up, which parts of the statement, sorry, I'm looking at the statement, author Diane Moses, looking at the right one, I hope.
Yes.
Yep. And along with the statements of truth, there was an indication as to who would be speaking to which part. Obviously, in one case, they're not speaking, that's a written submission. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the part that we are not hearing about today is the section of that statement dealing with biodiversity net gain.
Correct.
Right. That is absolutely fine, and that's the statement headed Biodiversity and Ecology Proof of Evidence Rule 6 submission, author Diane Moses. Can I just clarify then the role of the other document that was submitted from And I know there was correspondence on this from GS Ecology, authored by Cherry Leung. Are we hearing about that today? Or if not, and I'm assuming not, is that a written submission from the Rule 6 party?
Just checking. Just checking. I think it's been sort of absorbed into one document. I remember right.
Yes, it's a supporting report that was, I think, submitted as part of our Rule 6.
It was submitted. Well, I need to know, has it been entirely overtaken? And if it has not, are we going to be referring to it today? And I'll say now that would come as a surprise to me because it wasn't on the list of documentation. What's the appellant's position?
So
No,
Sorry?
sorry, we don't refer to it.
We don't plan to.
So what, put bluntly, what do I do with it? Is it a written submission? Has it been completely overtaken by events and I don't need to look at it further? I mean, I have read it once.
I think it's a core document that we use to support our report.
It was a core document apparently.
Yeah, I know.
Put in to support it.
Support our
but-
report.
I know,
Can we reference
I have read it, but what I want to know is that it? Am I simply supposed to take it into account as a written submission, or has it been entirely overtaken by events, in which case I can forget about it?
Let's take the written
Best
submission.
to take it into account as a written submission.
So yes, I mean, I think the appellant had understood that it's a survey report essentially,
Isn't it? Yeah.
which forms part of the basis for what Dr. Guest says about the condition of the various wildlife corridors. Obviously, we don't have Dr. Leung to cross-examine, so we will,
Yeah.
that's a caveat to it, and that goes to its weight.
Sure.
But so we see it as a survey report that
So it's
sits
a survey
behind.
report that feeds into the evidence that we're about to
Yeah,
hear.
indeed.
Fine.
I should also say so, and I apologise because you don't have a physical copy of the Statement of Common Ground, but just within that, I think we'd reached the position with the Rule 6 party where we understood that in terms of what was going to be spoken to today, because in the Rule 6 declaration document, there's overlap between different people in terms of the sections as well. So I think both Dr. Gareth Mathers and Dr. Guest were speaking to section 4 onwards. But our understanding from the Statement of Common Ground was that impacts on protected species as such, so this great crested newts, bats, was something for others that Dr. Guest wasn't going to be speaking to, but that may be wrong.
Yes, just to clarify.
that one.
Keep it.
Yes, sorry, just to clarify that.
Can you put the mic on?
If just that. So
Just to clarify, I should be speaking to sections 4 to 7 of the proof of evidence from the Rule 6 party, and I will certainly be covering the impact on the wildlife corridors and, where relevant, the impact on protected species that live in those corridors in around the site.
Right. Which, can I just be clear on this, which sections in that document are you then dealing with?
Sections 4
Yeah.
through to 7.
Bear with me a second. Get there in a moment. Right. So 4 through to 7, that comes as a surprise because I thought you were dealing with section 4 through to the end of the document. Is that's not the case?
In terms of the statement of common ground,
which I haven't seen. Let's
Oh,
just
no,
focus,
right,
let's just
okay,
focus
yes, sorry,
on
yes,
the
yes.
document that we've got.
yes. So the last elements of the proof of evidence relating to dark skies beyond 7 will not be directly addressed in my submission or my oral
Ah,
statement.
okay. I thought it was because that's what the Rule 6 party said you were doing. But if you're not, you're not.
Yeah.
I can, yes, I can cover that, yes,
Yeah.
No, I don't mind.
yes.
I just need to
yes.
know what you are going to cover and not. Because in the
Yes,
statement,
yes,
in the statement of
Yes.
truth document, which is what I'm referring to, it said that you would be covering section 4 to the end and an element of the executive summary. So it's not section 4 to the end, it's section 4 to 7.
to 7,
Okay.
yes, yes.
Right.
You can do to the end.
I can,
Right.
yes, sorry, sir. We had this discussion in the discussion about the statement of common ground. And again, I will cover relevant aspects of the dark skies piece in relation to the impact on the corridors.
Sorry, I've just closed that document down for the moment, but dark skies is section,
Dark skies is section. Is section 8.
right, so I don't, honestly, I don't mind, but you just said you were covering section 4 to 7
Yes, yes.
plus 8.
Yes, yes, just to clarify again, it's really in relation to the central focus of my statement will be the impact of the development on the wildlife
Yeah.
corridors.
Yep.
And so parts of that refer to protected species and then the dark skies as well
Okay.
have a bearing on that.
From the appellant's point of view, are you comfortable with what's being led in chief? We don't know that yet. I know.
I don't really, sir, but I understand the difficulty in that there's a proof which has obviously had input from a number of different people. We can explore with Dr. Guest what her expertise or what
Sure.
her role is in relation to particular parts of it. The statement of common ground tried to separate these things out. So we had understood that potential effects on the species themselves and whether the surveys were adequate was not something she was going to be speaking to, but that's fine. I can ask her questions depending on what she says. So that's okay. We'll roll with it.
That's fine. I mean, I should say, I'm just trying to identify what we're about to hear. And I did read the whole of that statement, excuse me, the whole of the statement last night, but I only skip read the biodiversity net gain section because I knew that was a written submission that we weren't dealing with. So that's fine. Okay, Mr. Brown, over to you and your witness.
Thank you. Do you want to take the podium?
No, there's one behind you, lurking behind you. You'll probably have to shift the computer slightly. Turn the mic round. Okay, Ms. Brown, if you'd like to introduce your witness.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Guest, your proof of evidence is document NID 5.9, so if everyone wants to get that. Can you please introduce yourself to the inquiry?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Brown. My name is Philippa Guest. I confirm that I am a member of Hazelmere Vision and the Hazelmere Society. I live in Shottermill. I am not a member of the Hazelmere South Residents Association, nor I am a member of the town or borough councils.
And can you please confirm that you're appearing as the Rule 6 ecological witness?
I can, yes.
Okay, before we start, can I just ask whether you or not you would like to add any additional comments, edits to your proof of evidence?
Yes, we have now an agreed statement of common ground with the appellant that I think has been added today. And we have also produced a handout of timeline, which really refers to the ecological assessments that are carried out on the appeal site. And that really is just to support the text in my proof of evidence sections 4.1 and 4.10, 11 and 5.1.
Thank you. We'd all like to propose, because this is a rather paper heavy one, we've printed out some maps to help, so you don't have to jump from page to page, which might help. They're all extracts, so they're not new. It might be an idea just to.
So these are extracts that are
They're
already
already
in.
extracts. They're just easier than skipping backwards and forwards on
Yeah.
in the book.
Just whilst we're distributing those, ecology statement of common ground, the timeline, is that something the appellant has seen?
Haven't seen the timeline. The statement of common ground,
Yeah.
we're hoping the council's printing.
Yeah. The timeline not shared with the appellant though.
Have we shared that? Sorry, have we shared that?
No, not so far.
Was
no.
that the one which was in Mr. Jack's document already? Is that the same one?
It's extracted from.
It's extracted from, so it's
Mr.
not
Jack's
new. It's just an extraction
And
again.
Mr. Davis's.
Okay, so statement of common ground being printed, fine, and we can doubtless pick up what that says on the way through, but the timeline the appellant hasn't seen. Why not?
It was just put together yesterday, really just as an aid memoir for us, and we thought it might be useful.
It
to
just
share.
helps the discussion.
Well, have you got printed copies?
Yes,
Right. I think let's have it in, but if it causes any difficulties to the appellant or you need to have a look at it with your witness, fine. If it is in fact just a summary of what we've already got, I'm fairly easy with that. But let's take that in provisionally and see where we go to with it. But anyway, sorry, these are the, and the timeline, right.
I hope that's okay with everybody.
Sorry, when you said timeline, I was assuming it would be literally a timeline. You've got that now, and it runs to 3 pages. I won't take that in formally for the moment.
Okay,
We will take a coffee break at some point mid-morning, and the appellants can obviously have a look at that, as can I, and we'll see where we are on that. So I'll put that to one side for the moment. But right, we've got the maps in. So
okay, thank you.
onwards.
As this is a paperwork heavy, we've got 3 documents which I think it'll be good for people to have ready and open, if that's okay.
Yeah.
ID 2.6, Mr. Davis, Appeal 1. CD 6.3, the Hazelmere neighbourhood plan, which I expect will be centred around H12 on page 49. And NID 11.2, Mr. Jack's rebuttal. Okay, just so we can shortcut everyone rustling papers. Okay, thank you. And Dr. Guest, subject to the clarifications, do you confirm that the evidence you provide are true opinions or, where relevant, truly represent your understanding of the ecology on the Midhurst Road site?
Yes, I do.
Would you like to now produce your evidence? Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Morning, everyone. My name is Philippa Guest. I'd just like to briefly introduce myself. As I said earlier, I am a member of Haslemere Vision and the Haslemere Society. I live in Shottermill and I am not a member of the HSRA, nor am I a member of the town and borough councils. I have a background in biological sciences with a doctorate in applied zoology from Imperial College London. I have spent most of my professional career working in the agricultural industry on crop protection and food production. For the last 22 years, I have worked as an independent consultant advising public and private sector clients on sustainable agriculture. I have lived in Haslemere for almost 30 years. About 10 years ago, I joined Haslemere Vision, a local community group tasked with helping the town council to develop and deliver the Haslemere Neighbourhood Plan. That is reference document CD 6.3. Our consultation process confirmed that local residents greatly valued the unique landscape and biodiversity assets that make Haslemere such a special place to live and work in, and they wanted to see these assets protected and enhanced over the long term. We therefore set up a special working group to develop the plan's environmental policies and included a strong focus on biodiversity. One of our first tasks was to carry out a biodiversity audit of Haslemere's biodiversity assets, and we commissioned two professional ecologists, Gareth Mathis of GPM Ecology and Giles Sutton of GS Ecology, to help us with this work. The audit formally mapped out the Haslemere Ecological Network, or HEN as we tend to call it for short. This is made up of over 40 sites designated for their nature conservation value at international, national or local level. It also includes priority habitats, an extensive area of ancient woodland, a particularly special and irreplaceable habitat, the River Wey and its tributaries, over 20 designated local green spaces and green fingers. All of these different components are connected by a network of wildlife corridors. This mapping work underpins policy H12 in the Haslemere Neighbourhood Plan. The Neighbourhood Plan was formally adopted in November 2021, but our working group carried on and now has become Haslemere Biodiversity, a standalone, not-for-profit entity with a very simple mission: to protect and enhance our physical and natural environment for the long-term benefit of wildlife and the local community. Over the last few years, the group has gone from strength to strength. The biodiversity audit provided an excellent foundation for developing the Haslemere Nature Recovery Strategy. Working closely with the team at Surrey County Council in preparing the Surrey Local Nature Recovery Strategy and the Town Council, we hope to deliver the Haslemere Nature Recovery Strategy later this year. For the past 2 years, we have been engaged in a significant project to ground truth the HEN. This involves carrying out surveys of key sites and wildlife corridors across the town to gather more detailed information on their composition and condition, and to identify opportunities and priorities for restoration and enhancement. Haslemere is rich in wildlife and supports a number of internationally and nationally important species. Many of these are protected under national and international law. Our group is involved in a number of mini projects that focus on monitoring and boosting populations of several of these protected species, including the hazel dormouse. This is why I am here today, speaking as part of the Rule 6 group. Haslemere Vision objects to this planning application. We are not anti-development. We fully recognise the need for more housing in the town and the wider borough, but we also strongly support the principle of the right homes in the right place, and we do not believe that this proposal meets that requirement. However, if the appeal is granted, we want to ensure that the impact of this development on the hen, its habitats and its species is properly understood and respected and will be addressed through appropriate mitigation and/or compensation. As mentioned earlier, we are a community group of volunteers with a passionate interest in our local nature. We are a not-for-profit organisation, and as such, we are not supported by large amounts of funding and/or legal resources. In putting together our evidence package, we have benefited hugely from the help and support of many local people and organisations with extensive local knowledge and expertise of this area's ecology.
Sorry, I'd forgotten that was 10 o'clock.
Thank you, yes. We strongly believe that this local knowledge and expertise can only add value to the process underway here today. As stated, our proof of evidence, which is document reference NID 5.9, is a composite report. We had originally intended that our ecology experts Gareth Mathis and Professor Tom Oliver would be here in person to present their evidence. Unfortunately, this was not possible due to prior work commitments in the case of Gareth Mathis and due to unexpected personal circumstances in the case of Professor Oliver. So I am here in my capacity as Chair of Haslemere Biodiversity to present our evidence. I should emphasise that I am not a professional ecologist, nor am I a planning expert. However, my background gives me a relevant working knowledge and understanding of the issues, and I will try my best to present our evidence and answer your questions as fully as possible.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Dr. Guest.
Morning.
Thank you for clarifying. I think it was, I mean, it's an obvious fact that you're not a professional ecologist yourself. You're not regulated by any professional body.
That's right. Yes.
I'm going to start off in that regard.
Please excuse me a second.
Yeah.
Dr. Guest, have you actually finished your
No,
evidence
sorry,
statement?
Yes,
I think you've forgotten to turn the page over.
I'm sorry, I thought you finished.
No. I'm just getting into the evidence. So
I do apologise.
wonder
That
why
was
it's
my
like
fault.
this.
I indicated to the appellant. I thought you
Right,
concluded
I
at that point. My apologies.
No, don't worry. So shall I proceed?
Yeah, please do. And perhaps if you wave when you finish to
Yeah,
avoid any further.
certainly, yes, I'll put my hand
Sorry
up,
about
yes.
that.
Okay, so moving on to the evidence. I would like to focus my evidence today on the impact of this development proposal on the Haslemere Ecological Network, or HEN, and in particular the wildlife corridors and protected species located within the development site and surrounding areas. This means I will principally talk to sections 4 to 7 of our proof of evidence. I do not intend to read these out verbatim, but will instead focus on the key messages. And I'll begin with a brief introduction to the HEN corridor network and its ecological value so that you can orientate yourselves. And as Mr. Brown mentioned, we've produced a set of handouts with various maps and diagrams in that I hope will bring some clarity and help understanding of what we're talking about when we talk about this network, particularly of corridors across the site. So my starting point is that the wildlife corridors form the backbone of the HEN. They stitch together its different components, and protecting and enhancing their functionality is vital to ensuring the long-term integrity and resilience of the entire HEN. The Haslemere Neighbourhood Plan Policy H12.1, which you can find in document CD6 6.3, states that Haslemere's ecological network shall be maintained, protected, consolidated, extended and enhanced as appropriate to their existing designations and biodiversity status. Development that negatively affects these sites or fragments the network will not be supported unless appropriate mitigation is incorporated into the proposal. So, as I said, we've produced this set of maps to help guide you around the corridor network. And just to clarify as well, they do not constitute new evidence. All the maps referenced are already included in the core document list. The Scotland Park site contains several significant wildlife corridors running across the site from north to south and also from west to east. This corridor network plays a vital role in connecting the important ecological features located within the site, as well as with the surrounding countryside. If you look at map number 2 in your handout, reference figure 1, Wildlife Corridors of Neighbourhood Plan Policy H12, you will see that there are 3 main corridors running from north to south, and we'll refer to these as the Western, Central and Eastern corridors. And these connect with at least 2 other corridors that run from east to west. This interconnectedness is important in allowing wildlife to move easily across the site and into the surrounding countryside. The corridors support a range of protected species. Using the species evidence from Mr. Davis's proof of evidence of 12th of December 2023, this is document ID 2.6, it's the table on pages 6 and 7, I will explain where within the site the protected species can be found. And in your, oh, sorry, yes. Yes, so just to say, going back to the handout, the evidence from Mr. Davis's report can be shown in terms of the results for dormouse surveys, figure 9, the trap trees with back roosting potential, figure 12, location of bat survey work, which was from the ESA Appendix 6, and results of that survey work again from ESA Appendix 6. The woodland, native hedgerows and hedgerows with trees are suitable habitats for dormice. Foraging, nesting, commuting and hibernating dormice and a breeding population are confirmed to be present on the site. Dormice have been recorded from the Midhurst Road, from woodland and from the southern edge of the site. The site's habitats are well connected with the surrounding hedgerows and woodlands, making it likely that this is not an isolated population, but part of a larger population extending into the surrounding landscape. The Dormouse Handbook 2025 states that hazel dormice are particularly affected by habitat deterioration and fragmentation, and also by inappropriate habitat management. For these reasons, they are highly vulnerable to local extinction. Moving on to bats. 9 species of bats have been recorded using the site for commuting and foraging within the on-site habitats, and they prefer field boundaries and woodland. The species most frequently recorded at the site is common pipistrelle, with soprano pipistrelle, Natusius's pipistrelle, serotine, Leisler's bat, the barbastule, brown long-eared, noctule and myotis species recorded in smaller numbers. Reptiles have been recorded from the eastern, western and northern part of the central corridor, and again refer to figure 4, page 10, ID 2.6. Slowworms have been recorded from the field margins, primarily in the north and west of the site, and a small number of grass snakes have been recorded from the woodland. Survey results indicate that the site supports breeding populations of both species. The site is well connected with the surrounding landscape, and the reptiles using the site are likely to be part of a population that extends into the surrounding areas. 32 bird species have been recorded from the site, including 11 species of note for nature conservation. These include the dunnock, marsh tit, song thrush, bullfinch and herring gull. A main badger set and several outlier sets were previously found in woodland to the south of the proposed development area, but by 2022 this had fallen out of use. The main set was located in the vicinity of the central corridor, and the west-east corridors towards the southern boundary. This is figure 2, page 8, ID 2.6. In summary, the appellant's survey results confirm that this site has a rich biodiversity that includes priority habitats, lowland mixed deciduous woodland, hedgerows and lines of trees, and is home to many priority species. Additionally, it lies within 500 metres of the Blackdown and Valewood SNCI. I'd now like to turn to the impact of the proposed development on the corridor network. The appellant concludes that the impact of the scheme will not have adverse effects on the wildlife corridors. And this is cited in NID 11.2, rebuttal proof of evidence of Mr. Jack. The Rule 6 party disagrees. Looking at the maps, the western, central and eastern corridors will all be directly affected by severance and the removal of trees and shrubs to facilitate the construction of houses and roads. There will also be extensive removal of mature and semi-mature trees in the western corridor running along the Midhurst Road to create the access road to the development. The appellant claims that there will be limited disruption to the canopy cover along the Midhurst Road and that there will only be a small gap of around 5 metres in the vegetation caused by the creation of the new access road. We dispute this. When the visual sprays are included, the gap is much larger, more like 180 metres, and this is referencing Mr. Johnson's proof of evidence that can be found in document NID 5.5, and this is likely to disrupt movement of both dormice and bats. Dormice are primarily arboreal, spending most of their time in trees and shrubs and rarely descending to the ground. The creation of the new access road will affect the ability of dormice to move through the tree canopy, both along the corridor and across the Midhurst Road, to connect with other populations in adjacent areas to the west, such as Longdean, Hedgehog Lane and Sturt Farm. It will also disruption of flight lines for bats. And in your handout, the first map shows the location of the hedgerows and ancient woodland patches that I've just referred to on the other side of the Midhurst Road. It's to the west of the Midhurst Road, and we're talking here about the areas of Sturt Farm, Longdean Estate and Hedgehog Lane. There will also be a likely increase in lighting and recreational pressure due to the proximity of the proposed development. The introduction of artificial lighting, that's street lights and light spill from houses, is likely to disrupt bat foraging and commuting activity. For light-sensitive species, such as barbastel, this is likely to reduce the number and frequency of bats that use the site for foraging and commuting. The development scheme is also likely to increase the risk of disturbance, injury or killing of birds or dormice as a result of the introduction of additional pet cats and dogs. Whilst we acknowledge that the major factors threatening dormouse populations are loss or fragmentation of habit, the appellant argues that predation by pets is relatively small. This is in NID 11.2, paragraph 2.6. However, we believe that predation by pet cats can still have a significant effect, especially when even small, seemingly small losses may be felt more strongly in small, struggling populations of a threatened species, such as the dormouse. We stand by our assertion that all these factors combine to adversely affect the ecological functionality of the wider corridor network. Now, the appellant proposes 3 principles of mitigation to address these concerns. Firstly, advanced planting of trees and shrubs around the proposed point of access from Midhurst Road prior to commencement of construction, and the planting of further trees and shrubs once construction is complete. However, it will take years for the new planting to mature, and form an effective canopy, especially since the road will be wider and the trees planted further from the road edge. Secondly, the design and implementation of a suitably sensitive lighting strategy in accordance with local dark skies policy requirements. Our position here is that currently there is just not enough detail to judge whether sufficiently sensitive lighting would be achievable, given there will be a need for lighting due to highways requirements at the road junction and within the residential development. We agree that this issue should be addressed through a revised version of Condition 29. Thirdly, provision of a wildlife tunnel beneath the access road to facilitate movement of wildlife across the road. We acknowledge that this approach has been used successfully with a number of mammal species, such as badgers and hedgehogs. However, we question the viability of using such a tunnel for dormice, which are principally arboreal in habit and rarely come down to the ground to feed. The appellant's ecologists suggest that ropes tied to the tunnel entrance may help to encourage dormice to come down to the tunnel, but no evidence is presented this is a viable strategy for dormice. A variety of other strategies are referenced in document NID 11.2, paragraph 2.54, but no specific dormouse mitigation recommendations apart from the wildlife tunnel are made for this particular scheme. We have proposed some specific requirements to the wording of Condition 35 to address the concerns outlined above. In conclusion, we assert that the harm that will be caused for the wildlife corridor network does not accord with NPPF paragraph 187D, because the impacts of the proposed development on biodiversity are not minimised. The features that currently support priority species will be harmed. It also therefore does not accord with the Hazelmere Neighbourhood Plan Policy H12.1. Thank you. Finished.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Brown, anything further from you?
Just one point, Dr. Guest. In NID 5.9, paragraph 5.5, which is the mitigation part, can you just confirm that the boxes that have been put up are incorrectly mounted and are actually dangerous to dormice as they're mounted?
Yes, I can, yes.
For reference, this is a photograph of dormice boxes being mounted back to front, which leaves them open for birds of prey to attack them.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was all.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Good morning again, Dr. Guest. We'll start again. I'm just going to pick up that last question that Mr. Brown asked you about the boxes that you say are incorrectly mounted. Those are mitigation features for phase 1, aren't they?
That's
Nothing
right,
to do with
yes.
phase 2.
Yes, correct.
Now, I want to begin by dealing with the evidence you've given your proof, which I think is your evidence, so I appreciate your drawing on evidence from others, including the report, the ground truthing report from Cherry Leung, in relation to the habitat condition assessment of corridor number 10.
10, yes.
Now, in relation to the significance of the condition of that wildlife corridor, there's sort of two directions that points in terms of its role in the matters before the inspector. One, which we'll come on to, is in relation to the functionality of the corridors and the impact that the scheme might have on them. But it also plays into the biodiversity net gain assessment, doesn't it? Because there's a point made by the Rule 6 party, I think by Dr. Oliver.
That's right, yes.
Professor Oliver, in relation to that being an indicator that there may be problems in the biodiversity net gain assessment.
That's right,
Yep.
yes.
Now, given that you're dealing with the habitat condition assessment, is it right for me to put some questions to you on that in relation to biodiversity net gain? Appreciating, or is that just something that we have to deal with in writing and ask Mr. Jack to deal with it?
I can try, and then if I can't
Okay,
answer
well,
satisfactorily.
we'll start, and
Yes,
if you say this is really all Professor Oliver's evidence, then
Yes.
that's fine. We can deal with it in another way. So in relation to where all this goes, firstly, if you just pick up the proof of evidence, the Rule 6 party proof of evidence, I may slip into calling it yours or
Yes.
others, but we know
Yes.
what we're talking about. Paragraph 3.3 of the proof says, refers to the Hazelmere Neighbourhood Plan, paragraph 3.78, which is some of the explanatory text. So it refers to the emerging environmental bill, and that would include a requirement for developers to deliver a biodiversity net gain of at least 10%. It further states this matter is incorporated within policy 12.3. Now we can go and look at that. Are you contending, is the Rule 6 party contending, that there is a 10% statutory or policy requirement for this scheme in terms of biodiversity net gain?
We are contending that there is a statutory requirement, yes.
Okay, can we just, it may assist you to look at NID 4.11, which is the statement of common ground between Waverley Council and the appellant. Have you got that? Found
Yes,
that document?
I do. Yes, I do.
Page 17, 4.24. It's under a heading there. You'll see ecology BNG. Are you there?
Not quite. Sorry, which section again was it?
It's 4.24. It's page 17.
Page 17.
It's electronic page 17 as well as written page 17. Are you there?
Page 17. Right, ecology BND. Yes, I'm just moving
So-
across the scouts. Yes.
So, so 4.24 at the bottom, very bottom of the page.
Yes.
Yeah, first sentence, and this is really a matter of law, but as the original application was made in July 2022, there's no statutory requirement for BNG. Now, that's right, isn't it? Or maybe
Yes,
you don't.
agreed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and then in relation to policies, over the page, at the bottom of the page, last paragraph, last sentence of that paragraph, 4.24, refers to the local plan policy, DM1, and paragraph 187 of the framework, both seek a net gain in biodiversity without identifying a specific percentage separate to the Environment Act requirements. So a net gain of just 1% would be policy compliant in these circumstances. Now, so that's the agreed position between Waverley and the council in relation to the local authorities policy.
Yes.
If we then go and look at what the Hazelmere Neighbourhood Plan does, H12.3, you got that? We'll keep coming back to the neighbourhood plan, I'm afraid, so hopefully you've got it open now. And we're at page 51.
She'll just need to get back into that. Sorry, could you just confirm the reference again, please?
Yes, page 51.
And the document,
It's CD 6.3. Sorry, I didn't give that to you.
Yes, I'm here, yes.
So policy H12, that's the key policy
Yes.
for your evidence, I think, in terms of the Hazelwood Neighbourhood Plan. H12.3, development proposals should result in a net gain for biodiversity. Doesn't specify any target, does it? It doesn't give a figure for what level of biodiversity needs to be delivered.
That's correct, yes.
So it's akin, isn't it, to the development plan and the NPPF. All you need to do is deliver a 1% biodiversity net gain to meet it.
Yes, that's correct. Just to qualify, at the time of writing the plan, there was an expectation that the statutory requirement was going to be
Yep.
at least 10%. In fact, some of the other Waverley boroughs were pushing for more than that, and we'd hoped to be more ambitious. But yes, I accept your point.
No,
Yes.
fine. And obviously new applications coming forward, there is a statutory requirement, so that's a different
Yes.
system, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, looking at the calculations, because again, we need to just put this point on corridor 10 into some perspective. We can look at the officers' report, Waverley's officers' report, which is CD 4.2.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm there.
So this is the officers' report to the committee. Yeah.
Yes.
And if you go down to page, it's not, you have to rely on the electronic pages, but it's page 40, electronic page 40 in the PDF.
14, sorry.
40.
40.
If you've got a PDF reader, you might be able to type it into the page selector. So about 2/3 of the way through the report. And there's a heading 20, biodiversity.
Right. Yes, 20 biodiversity. I
Yeah.
have it.
Now, most of that page is taken up by summarising relevant policies. Then at the bottom of the page, you see a reference to the ecology chapter and the various documents that have been submitted. And then over the page, on the third paragraph down, see officers reporting on the advice that they were receiving from Surrey Wildlife Trust, who were essentially the ecology consultees for the council
Yes.
internally. Yeah. So Surrey Wildlife Trust has been consulted on the application, has provided a detailed consultation response, which the application has sought to address with a written state response, updated survey report, and BNG enhanced strategy. Noting there that Surrey Wildlife Trust required proprietary determination of various things, and although we've lost the final bullet, you can see at the bottom there,
Yes.
clarification of stated BNG values. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So Surrey Wildlife Trust they pushed the appellant on this issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then in relation to wildlife corridors, which is the next chapter or next section,
Yes.
point being raised that the section of trees alongside the Midhurst Road was identified as forming part of the Hazelmere Ecological Network.
Yes.
Reference to the relevant map appended to the plan. And you can see there over the page they identify that the proposed enhanced wildlife corridors within the residential area are also partially fragmented by residential roads. So essentially picking up your points. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Need to scroll down a little bit to get to the particular section dealing with biodiversity net gain, which is at the bottom of page 44. There's a heading, requirement to demonstrate a measurable net gain. That's biodiversity
Yes,
net gain.
I have it.
Reports that the applicant has confirmed that the development would deliver a biodiversity net gain. We're all here within summary essentially of what Surrey Wildlife Trust is saying. So this is reporting that there'd been a confirmation summary at the bottom through that paragraph of what's proposed in order to deliver that biodiversity net gain. And over the page you'll see management enhancement for BNG goes beyond this. That's what the SANG is required for the SANG, to include woodland management, coppicing, ride management, edge habitat management, etc. across the whole woodland, new mixed scrub planting, enhanced suds features, hedgerow planting, etc. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And then below that, SWT therefore advised that should the LPA, I think, grant planning permission, they should secure the BNG. This has been identified in the assessment. This will be required prior to commencement. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And then just one further point, just 2 further paragraphs down under biodiversity and ecological enhancements. Again, SWT's comments on the BNG enhancement strategy. They say this objectively shows that the development will achieve a habitats unit net gain of 35% and a hedgerow unit net gain of 24%, largely achieved through the management of woodland to restore it to good ecological condition and the creation of new species-rich grassland.
Yes.
So the local authority took advice from professional consultants experienced in these matters, didn't they? And they concluded that there was going to be biodiversity net gain well in excess of the 1% required. And in fact, substantially in excess of that. Yeah.
Yes, although it may be just worth qualifying that most of that net gain is, as I understand it, going to come from improved woodland management that relates to the plantation of conifers that is in the site, which is going to be removed and then subjected to enhanced management, because as things stand at the moment, it's been very poorly managed.
Yes.
And so that was going to make a significant contribution to the uplift in biodiversity net gain.
Yes. I mean, that's a point that Professor Oliver, I think, has made, isn't it?
He has.
Yes. I mean, I was going to ask Mr. Jack to deal with that.
Right.
But have you looked at the biodiversity net gain enhancement strategy?
Yes, this
Yeah.
is a specific document you want me to.
Well, I'm just asking, have you looked at it?
Yes.
Yes. So if you go to that document, CD 2.49,
CD 2.49. Yes,
yeah.
I'm there.
And if you go to page 12, and it's a bit tricky trying to read these tables because they relate to different areas and they're not necessarily always immediately clear which parcels they're relating to. And obviously it changes pre and post development.
Yes.
But table 3.1, just to give a sense of the scale of conifer removal we're talking about here. If you look down at that table, you'll see the second column has habitat type.
Yes.
We get to other coniferous woodland at the bottom of, this is the baseline habitats table.
Yes.
we've got two very small parcels on page 11. And then over the page, the second row down, I understand that that is the principal area to be removed. It's 0.73 hectares.
Woodland and forest, other coniferous woodland, line 2,
Yeah.
yes.
So that's the coniferous
Yes.
woodland scheduled for gradual removal. See, at the moment it forms 1.69 habitat units in the calculation. By contrast, just to give a sense of it while we're looking at the table, if you look at the much larger areas of broadleaf woodland below, 4.85 hectares, 3.06, much larger part of the habitat units as currently on site.
Yes,
When we then compare that with the created habitats, because this has been the coniferous area has been assessed as being a created habitat. See that at table 4.1, page 19, page 18, digital page 19. There, table 4.1, on-site post-intervention habitats created.
yes,
So second row up from the bottom is the total
Yes.
amount of other woodland broadleaved created.
yes,
It's 2 hectares of that. So 0.73 of it relates to the coniferous. Yeah.
yes, I'm sorry, I'm on table 4.1 and I'm looking at the
Second row up.
second row up, woodland and forest, yes.
So there's just over 2
Just over
hectares.
2 hectares, that's
And
right,
that leads to
yes.
just over 9 habitats units delivered.
Yes,
So in terms of the total contribution here, we're about four units or so compared to 1.6 pre. So we're talking about 2.5 hectare units of gain for that element.
yes, and is this, this is on-site post-intervention habitats created?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry, I may not be able to deal with this as adequately as you might like, because this is not an area where I'm particularly knowledgeable.
I wasn't, I have to say, I wasn't planning to ask you on it. I was going to ask Mr. Jack to comment, but since you know, I offered,
Yes,
the basic point is it's clear from these tables, and I'll ask Mr. Jack to explain this further, and he obviously could be questioned by Mr. Brown on it. It's clear from this that the removal of the coniferous plantation, that is a very small part of the overall B&G gain shown.
yes,
And as we saw from the summary by Surrey Wildlife Trust, it's actually the broader management of the woodland and the creation of the species-rich grassland that drives the gains, isn't it?
yes, I certainly agree that improved management of the existing woodland is going to make a significant difference there. And on that point, it's just rather disappointing, I guess, that the current landowner has not done a better job in terms of managing that woodland, and that the proposal is largely dependent on achieving this additional gain through improving the management.
Well, whether it's disappointing to you or not, it is an important feature of this scheme, isn't it? That it will put 78% of the site, which I get quite a lot of feedback there, but maybe I'm just too close. That it will put 78% of the site into this broader management. You don't. I mean, I noted, slightly jumping out of my order, but I noted in your evidence in chief, you referred to the mission of the Haslemere Biodiversity Group. I had a quick look at your website, and I saw also that your vision to become a recognised haven for wildlife with a series of well-connected, well-managed habitats that
Yes.
enable species to flourish and become abundant. Now, putting aside for the moment any points about calculations, I mean, you'd accept, wouldn't you, that the proper management of the 78% of the site for ecology, as set out in the draft landscape and ecological management plan and the SANG management plan, that will be beneficial, won't it?
Yes, oh, absolutely, yes,
And conservation an important and significant benefit.
yes.
Yeah. Indeed, entirely consistent with the vision and mission of the biodiversity group.
I would say yes, but just to qualify, I would also say that that level of improved management could be achieved without having to build this development on the site.
Well, there's no other mechanism before this inspector to deliver that, is there?
No, but that's just a additional comment.
Now, going back to Wildlife Corridor 10, which we've strayed away from a little bit, can I ask you to take up the ground truthing report? Now, I noticed in your evidence in chief, and it very helpfully sort of summarised the process that went into establishing the wildlife corridors. I think we probably will need to come back to the biodiversity audit in a bit.
Yes,
But
yes.
you referred to ground truthing being something that you're generally seeking to carry out under
Yes.
under the biodiversity audit.
May I just request, I haven't got my hard copy immediately to hand.
Of course, yeah.
Do we have a hard copy?
You have an electronic copy.
Do we have a core document number for this? I don't know. Can we just confirm which document we're talking about? Sorry, I'll one step out.
It's the GS ecology ground truthing, yes,
In the inquiry documents, it's within NID 5.9,
Yes, it's
so
in the-
it's essentially been put in there as a kind of appendix to the proof. And it starts at page 20, electronic page 20.
yes, I'm here,
Yeah.
yes, sorry.
Okay, thank you. So, firstly, so I think you said in your evidence in chief, you were talking about what Hazelmere Biodiversity has been doing.
Yes,
I can put it in those terms. And it's right, isn't it, that the identification of the wildlife corridors through the neighbourhood plan, that's based on a desk-based assessment, isn't it? It's looking at relevant sources of information, bit of local knowledge, but it's not based on any surveying or detailed work done on those wildlife networks.
yes, that's correct. Just to qualify that it was initially based on a desktop analysis using a variety of different sources, including aerial satellite imagery, photography, OS maps, ancient maps, local knowledge, as you say, to assemble a picture of where these corridors went. And then since then, we have, as I mentioned, been engaged in an extensive program of 2 years of ground truthing these corridors. So we get a much more accurate picture of what they look like, what they contain, what their condition is.
Yes. So my question is this an example of what is done to ground truth the wildlife corridors?
It is, yes.
Yeah. So it's the same methodology that's being applied
Yes.
across
Yes.
the wildlife corridors within the hen. Yeah.
Yes, and that particular methodology is especially relevant and has been developed for the woody vegetation corridors. 48% of the parish area is woodland and trees and hedgerows. And we wanted to develop a slightly more sophisticated and refined analysis to look at the condition of those corridors. But we do have other corridors that are heathland and also grassland and some riparian corridors associated with the River Wey. And we're using slightly different methodologies
Yeah,
for
no,
those.
obviously rivers can't be treated in the same way as live trees.
Exactly.
But just looking at the reports, you say the methodology. So section 1, page 2 of the report,
Yes.
1.2. It's been undertaken using the statutory biodiversity metric condition assessment methodology.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's an assessment of habitat condition. It's not an assessment directly, at least, of the ability of any corridor to provide a dispersal function for species. It's assessing them as habitats in themselves.
It is, but it goes on to look at the provide details of the in this case the shrubs and trees present.
Yeah.
And it makes comments on the overall condition of the corridor in terms of its functionality, and key purpose of this was to try and identify those areas that needed restoration, those corridors that needed some repair, and where areas could be enhanced.
Yes. I mean, we'll come to this in a moment, but I mean, I didn't see any suggestions for enhancement within the report. That's not there, is it?
That is often taken as a separate set of recommendations once the survey has been completed.
Right. Okay. And I mean, what we have in terms of output, so we see at page 2, a plan essentially showing where the identified corridors taken from the Haslemere Neighbourhood Plan are, and a sort of breakdown, so there's numbering to identify different subsections of it.
Yes.
And then over page 4, table 3, habitat conditions assessments. Yeah.
Yes.
And those are conditions assessments of them as habitats.
Yes.
Yeah. And the inspector will see that if he looks at the
Yes.
tables. That's what's being done, and it's using that methodology.
Yes, that's right.
Just a couple of points. I mean, we see from this, I mean, some of these corridors, and we can see this from the descriptions in the tables behind it, but perhaps we don't need to go there.
Yes.
And if you look at 12, 7, 11, 6, for example, although these are being assessed by reference to a corridor, these are actually parts essentially of woodland which they adjoin.
Yes.
Yeah. And just by way of cross-reference really with the BNG assessment, we see that 12 and 7 have been assessed by the authors of the report as in poor condition, haven't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
12 and 7.
12 and 7.
12 and 7.
So those are parts of the wider Red Court Woods area.
Yes.
which, as we know, is a key part of the site in terms of the assessment that the appellant's assessment that significant biodiversity net gains can be delivered.
That's right,
Yeah.
yes. Can I just add an additional point there that the methodology also looks at the presence of invasive non-native species,
Yes,
and that will be taken into account in the scoring total.
yes, indeed.
So that, in the case of some of these corridors at least, will downgrade the score, the presence of these non-natives.
Yeah. And that's something which is provided, removal of those species is something that is provided for under the LEMP, isn't it?
It is,
Yeah.
yes.
So, for example, in relation to strip 1 on the western boundary, one of
Yes.
the features that is identified is that there's some cherry laurel in there. That's something that can be taken out under the proposal, isn't it? Just
Yes,
if you do look at,
That's correct.
Yeah.
And just also to highlight the fact this analysis was quite useful during the field visit, because if you look at corridors 3 and 4, those had a high degree of planting of non-native shrubs that had actually been done by the landowner that were, I think they have been subsequently removed after we flagged this up. But the appellant essentially had done this planting of non-native species.
yes, there are some non-native species that was highlighted and has now been removed. Yes.
Yes,
That's right.
yes.
I mean, that of course is exactly the kind of thing which the LEMP exists to control, isn't it?
Yes, I would hope so, yes.
Now, the point taken in the Rule 6 proof at 3.9 is that there's a different judgment taken between Dr. Lung, is it?
Sorry,
Cherry Lung, is she?
yes, Cherry Drum, yes.
Doc-
No, she's not a doctor.
Not a doctor. A different judgment taken between her and the BNG assessments. But that's only in relation to one very small part of the overall habitat on the site, isn't it?
Yes,
Now, in relation to the function of the wildlife corridors in terms of their ability to connect important ecological features, both inside the site and outside, there's nothing in this report that assists the inspector, is there? This just describes the habitat condition of
that's
those
correct, yes,
corridors.
yes.
And we know from your earlier answer that the HNP identification, actually, let's go to the biodiversity audit, because I think that's the only document before the inquiry that sets out a wider justification for the wildlife corridors. Is that right?
Yes,
So that's at that's CD 7.54. I'm hoping.
CD
Isn't
7,
reference? Yes, that's right. Yeah, CD 7.54.
yes.
Yeah.
I have it, yes.
Now, I think we need to start at page 9, section 5, how wildlife corridors were identified, because obviously the biodiversity audit is covering, as you said, a range of different kinds of sites and features, isn't it? And we
That's
actually can
right.
see at 5.1, there's the list of features of the ecological network. You've quite properly set them out in a hierarchy from internationally designated wildlife sites through nationally, local, priority habitats, ancient woodland, river streams, ponds, local green spaces, and then wildlife corridors at the bottom. Yeah.
Yes.
5.2, reference to the things that were taken into account in identifying the corridors. And important point that their role is to stitch together the ecological network and connect other elements, essentially.
Yes.
And then you say at 5.3, and I think this is the source for the point in the proof about a different approach by Haslemere Biodiversity to in-settlement and out-of-settlement corridors. The corridors being depicted on the map as strips of varying widths. Those within the settlement boundaries are narrower than the ones without. So that's the kind of full total of the assessment as to why they might be smaller within settlements and outside, isn't it?
Yes, although again, just to qualify that, this was the starting point for our ground truthing project.
Yeah.
And as we progressed over the last 2 years in developing the methodology for assessing the corridors, it's become very clear, certainly in the Haslemere parish, and I would expect it's elsewhere as well, that there is actually quite a noticeable difference between corridors that we're calling within settlement, and these are ones that are typically running along, for example, the boundaries of gardens and within a settlement area, versus those that are in a much more rural setting. And one of the most I suppose noticeable characteristics is that the species composition is often quite different in the in-settlement corridors. So there does tend to be a higher proportion of non-native species, and that does contribute to a reduced biodiversity in that type of corridor.
Yeah.
So it has been quite helpful to us in terms of building an overall picture to make that distinction.
Yeah. Okay. A couple of points. I mean, firstly, that wider evidence isn't before the inquiry, is it?
That wider.
You say you've been carrying out further studies, more ground truthing reports, etc. We don't have that before this inquiry, do we?
No, it isn't.
And then in relation to invasive species or
Yes.
non-native species, rather, again, that's very much something that will be controlled by the LENP, isn't it, in relation to anything within this site?
Yes, I would say yes, in principle. However, I think one of the issues that you have when you start a residential development, there will be planting that's carried out by the developer themselves, but then also you have homeowners planting their own trees and shrubs, whatever. So it can be sometimes quite difficult to control the planting and the subsequent management and control of invasive non-native species in those garden situations.
Yeah.
And quite often you'll see escapees, trees and shrubs that are non-native, escaping into the wider environment from individuals' gardens.
But again, those are the things that these plans exist to manage, aren't they?
They should be, although I'm not sure if the residential garden area is covered by the LEMP, is that?
Well, I think we're looking at the corridor here, aren't we? Which will be
Right.
outside of the
Yes.
residential gardens. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the function, this is again all about habitat condition, isn't it? Rather than contribution to species dispersal.
Yes.
In terms of the role that the corridor may play, the relevant corridors may play in species dispersal, we've obviously got a particular focus on the western side of the site, on the Midhurst Road side. Can we just look at it's map 8. It's at page 20, electronic page 27, written page 26 of this document. It's also the plan that should be at appendix 3 of the neighbourhood plan, although I don't think we actually have the appendices to the neighbourhood plans in the core documents.
So,
And that's the South Haslemere plan.
right, yes, so it's map. Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. So we've talked, we've agreed that the kind of the importance of wildlife corridors is to connect different ecological sites of higher status or
Yes.
of particular status. I mean, I was here in terms of the role that the corridor plays along the Midhurst Road. We see it goes all the way up into the centre of Hazelmere, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
So, I mean, as so far as it goes past that final local green space, I think it doesn't have any function there in terms of facilitating movements between sites, does it?
That's true. As you get further into the town, the role of the corridor is perhaps less important or less effective because of.
But it doesn't have any function there, does it? Because it's not taking you between different sites. Once it goes past Sandrock, that's just taking species into the centre of town.
Yes, that's right. It is the more southern areas that are directly adjacent to the Scotland Park site, though, that we've been interested in this particular context.
Yes, but we're just trying to understand what the function and what the value of this wildlife corridor is, as identified by Hazelmere Biodiversity. Parts of this corridor as it goes north are not of any particular function in terms of allowing species to disperse, is it? Are they?
Certainly, as you move further into the town, then its ability to connect to wilder areas on either side will be less than it is further south.
Okay, that's fair. And then, I mean, just between our site and Sandrock, I mean, there's a crossroads with Court Hill Road. I think it's called Holly Ridge on the northern side. If you're kind of moving down from that identified site at Sandrock towards the site, there's a full entrance to Holly Ridge, on which the inspector no doubt will see on his visits. Scotland's Drive, I think it is, on the south side as you come down Midhurst Road. Scotland Lane, both of those on the same side as the site. I mean,
yes,
this is a corridor which, insofar as it's helping species move up and down, north and south, it's already got significant roads coming into it, hasn't it?
Yes, it does. And we were certainly more focused on the more southern part of that corridor, particularly adjacent to the Scotland Park site. And that was mainly driven by the fact that from a dormouse perspective, there are important populations of dormice over to the west of the site on the other side of the road. As I mentioned earlier, up in the areas of Sturt Farm Sang, Sturt, the Longdean Estate, and also Hedgehog Lane, where there are some quite significant populations. So it's the connectivity between the Scotland Park site and those other dormouse sites that we were particularly interested in looking at in terms of the connectivity in that part of the corridor.
So it's more about east-west connectivity
it is, exactly.
Across the Midhurst Road than north-south.
And I think just to clarify, I think there was certainly a couple of statements made by Mr. Jack, we can clarify later, that and Mr. Davis certainly in his proof of evidence did comment that dormice commuting up into the town is probably less likely, and we'd fully agree with that. It is that east-west movement that is most important and relevant, I think.
And then in terms of the impact of the scheme on that,
yes,
there's obviously a period of there's going to be some tree removal, but also a lot of tree replacement. The inspector's already been to that.
yes.
But it's important for him to note that there will be substantial parts of that boundary that are unaffected by the scheme, and where any east-west connectivity through either, whether it's at tree level by canopy level or across the road itself at ground level, that will be entirely undisrupted, won't it?
Yes, although again, I just come back to the point that we're talking about the connectivity between the trees on the east and in the Western Corridor, on the Midhurst Road corridor, which we refer to as the Western Corridor. You have the east side, which runs along the boundary of the Scotland Park site,
Yeah.
and then the other side, the western side, which is actually probably less diverse, less suitable in some areas of that corridor as a corridor. But we're particularly interested in maintaining the connectivity of the aerial canopy from the east side on the Scotland Lane side over to the west.
Yes.
Yes.
So you're not so concerned about disrupting any connectivity north-south across where the access way meets the Midhurst Road.
No, it is it's
That's not your focus. I mean,
the
I accept
focus
you have a
is
point there.
is looking at the ability of dormice and other wildlife to use that corridor that is around the site, and the fact that the access road, that whole area where that will be constructed, will disrupt the ability to have that aerial connection.
Okay, thank you. I mean, more widely, and I don't think you dispute this, I mean, have you looked at the scale of the tree planting across the site more generally?
Briefly, we've only actually had one official visit, well, one visit to the
I
site
mean,
itself.
proposed tree planting.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
I mean, there are a number of areas there, for example, planting in the orchard area, in the southwest of the site, planting alongside the proposed wetland area, where tree
Yes.
planting will support corridors, won't it?
Yes, that should be the case, yes. It would depend, of course, what sort of corridors are going to be developed there and their suitability for species like dormice. So without knowing more details of exactly what's being proposed, and I think there's still an outline length.
Well, yes, there's an outline
Yeah.
length capable of
Yes.
further control and further agreement with the council. But you've looked at the tree planting plans, have you?
Yes, well, yes, in some degree,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, well, I mean, I'll ask Mr. Jack to comment on them,
Yes.
but they show significant additional planting, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah, which can in principle and will support these wildlife corridors, particularly in east to west
Yes.
connectivity. Yeah. I mean, the particular points around the access way and when it connects, you've made points about the tunnel. You don't, I think, rebut what Mr. Jack has said in relation to the evidence, the ecological evidence that dormice can travel at ground level over short distances and do go across roads. You haven't rebutted that?
I don't, no, I don't rebut that. I do agree that dormice can travel short distances across roads,
Yeah.
and there are several studies, and Mr. Jack has quoted some of them,
Yeah.
that confirm that. I think there is a question about the successful, whether that's a particularly successful strategy or not, in terms of a dormouse having to actually take the risk of crossing a road. And there is quite an interesting paper from Romania that was published at the last Dormouse conference.
Is that something before the inquiry?
Roadkill. It probably should be, yes.
Well, it's not, I don't think. So
no.
no,
No, but I think, but the point I'm trying to make is that yes, there are reports of dormouse successfully crossing roads.
Yeah.
The ability to have or to see evidence of follow-up monitoring studies And the A30 study is I think, an interesting example there of whether or not that is a successful strategy long term for the dormouse, and what the implications are long term on that population that's living in the central reservation of that particular study that Mr. Jack referred to, and their ability to successfully disperse if they need to, when there is evidence from other places that that's quite a high risk strategy, particularly for a fairly threatened species.
I mean, we're clearly not proposing an access road of equivalence to the A30.
No.
And we've got replacement planting.
Yes.
Canopy will recover. And I think I understand from your evidence in chief that your concern really is about the time before the canopy recovers rather than the long-term position.
Yes, although the planting plans, as I understand them, it will take some years for the new plantings in that area of the access road to become sufficiently mature to be able to extend across the road. And also there is the added point that the road is wider in that area, in that part.
But it's only part of the total boundary, isn't it?
Yes.
And you do accept that once it's matured, there will be canopy cover.
It will hopefully become functional. And I would also just add to that, that I think it's important that there is a sort of range of options available, as should be as part of the dormouse mitigation strategy. We talked about the tunnel and our concerns about the limitations there.
Sure.
That the aerial canopy route is going to be important.
There's no additional mitigation that you're proposing that hasn't been built in, is there?
I don't think so, no.
Now, on tree removal,
Is that Mr. Dale Harris, is that a useful pause point?
Thanks.
Sounded as though it was.
yeah, sorry. I'm hoping not too much longer, sir, but
Roughly how much? I mean,
no more than 20 minutes, half an hour.
are you okay to go on for 20 minutes, half an hour, or would you
I would
prefer a
like
break?
short break.
Yeah, let's take a break. 10 past now. Let's come back at 1:30, please. No rules. You can't speak to us. You can get a cup of coffee out. You can't talk.
And I moved to go to the bathroom.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it's good. It's not torture. Well, I don't know.
Well, a coffee would be very nice, thank you. White, no sugar, thank you.
Slide out.
Yes.
Bit of a trap up here.
Yes, can you get
Yeah,
past me?
sure,
Yes,
sure.
thank you. I don't think you're allowed to speak to me. Yes. Oh, thank you, Diane.
Okay, it's about 11:30. Let's resume. Mr. Dale Harris.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Guest, tree removal, next subject. In the proof of evidence, at 4.9, the authors of the proof refer to a veteran beech tree remaining within the area of the proposed access road. Is that your comment? That your bit of your judgment, actually?
4.9.
4.9, page 9. That you who have identified as being a veteran beech tree.
It's not my comment, but
Right. Okay.
what is your?
Did you see? Have you? In Mr. Jack's rebuttal, he says he refers to this comment. He notes that it doesn't indicate which tree is considered to be a veteran, or present any evidence in support of it. Have you identified which tree is said to be a veteran beech tree?
I'm just trying to look at it on the map. It's the tree that's close to Five Gates Cottage, tree 103
Right.
in the appeal site of the Coral Cultural Report.
Right. Okay. So that's the tree. Have you got Mr. Collins's rebuttal, second rebuttal from the first inquiry, which is ID 3.2, and that has an
Yes.
appendix, a number of appendices. Appendix 5 is the one which Mr. Jacks referred to.
Is this the sightline?
It's a,
report?
yes, exactly. It's a sightline note that was put
Yes.
in at the last inquiry because Mr. Brown, who then was just a third party, he made a point about 3 trees. If you go down to paragraph 7.
Sorry, you've lost me. Which appendix are we in?
Appendix 5, so 3.2, Appendix 5, appellant response to public comments
Okay.
on veteran trees.
Got it.
Page 2, paragraph 7. Yeah. You there?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I'm here. Yes.
Oh, sorry, just. So this was the way it was dealt with by the appellant at the last inquiry. You see there that it's a category U tree. It's identified as a category U tree. In the final column.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And removal was advised in relation to it. Yeah.
Yes.
The Rule 6 party hasn't put forward any evidence to challenge that assessment this time around, has it?
No.
Fine, thank you. The proof also in this area, and again, maybe it's not really you who is maybe not primarily your evidence, but these points about 2 stumps. Now, insofar as those do constitute a biodiversity resource, that of course needs to be put into the context of the wider biodiversity net gains to be delivered, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. It's very fair. Now, that I think is all we need to do on trees. Then there's some issues, the points later in the proof. Section 6, section 7, and the end of section 5, in relation to respectively survey adequacy and the likelihood that species licenses will be granted. Now, those are both, I think, those are both areas where essentially of ecological assessment, aren't they? They're about ecological evidence and the
Yes.
processes that ecologists are engaged in meeting the relevant policy and statutory requirements, aren't they? On bats and great crested newts, there are various eyes scattered across those paragraphs. Are these written by Dr. Mathers or Dr. Sutton?
Yes, this would be Gareth Mathis's.
Yeah. So
Piece,
in
yes.
terms of the kind of detailed points about adequacies of surveys or potential other habitats, other ponds, those points, it's not really fair for me to ask you questions about that ecological assessment because it's not your ecological view in the proof.
Well, you could ask me the questions, yes.
Well, if your answer is you're not the ecologist who's done this work, I don't think it's going to assist the inspector an awful lot to hear your answer on it. So I propose to ask Mr. Jack to comment on that rather than asking you any further
Okay.
questions. On the point about the licensing which would be required for any mitigation that would affect European protected species.
Yes.
Now, this does connect a bit more closely with what the points you've made about dormice, particularly in your
Yes,
evidence in
yes.
chief, which I sort of understand to be, you know, the corridors and the dormice seem to be your kind of principal area
Yes.
of involvement. In relation to that, Mr. Jack's obviously set out his position in his proof, and we'll deal with it in his evidence in chief. But can we go to ID 5.12, which was a document prepared by the professional ecologists at the last inquiry in response to questions from the inspector. It's entitled Updated Appellant and SWT, Surrey Wildlife Trust, Response to Inspectors' Questions.
Yes.
Because broadly what happened is proofs were put in by both Mr. Davies and Mr. Hutchinson, which we have in the documentation. Mr. Hutchinson then updated his position to accept that Mr. Davies had satisfied his concerns,
Yes.
and particularly in relation to the wildlife corridor. And then the inspector had some further questions and a note was put in, which is what we're looking at here. And you can see just from the headings, essentially we have the inspector's questions and then a response in blue from the appellant's ecologists,
Yes.
Mr. Davies, Mr. Kite, and then responses in green from Mr. Hutchinson, who was the ecologist for the council, essentially.
Yes.
And you'll see question B on that first, 1B on that first page, whether the proposals are capable of being completed in compliance with legislation protecting species and when necessary, whether Natural England would be likely to grant licenses that will be required. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think this is more, the first point is essentially consistent with your evidence. They identify, this is in blue, so this is the appellant's evidence, appellant's witnesses. The potential impacts on dormice are likely to require the development to obtain European protected species mitigation licenses. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Description of construction stage impacts as being small in scale and long-term effects on dormice being positive. Now, just pausing there. Long-term impacts on dormice. I think we agreed that the canopy will recover under what's proposed, and that there's widespread habitat enhancement. I mean, do you also agree that long-term the effects of the development on dormice will be positive? Just so I can kind of be clear where you are on that.
I suppose it depends to a large extent about how effectively the LEMP strategy is implemented, and also what the final detailed mitigation strategy for dormouse, for the dormouse will look like as well. Because at the moment, I think our position is that we're not convinced that the mitigation strategy for the dormouse is adequate.
Well, have you proposed any additions to it?
Yeah, I think that's something in
Yeah.
the statement of common ground that we want to add some further
Okay.
details.
These are on the conditions. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, we can discuss that in the conditions section. But assuming that an adequate condition is drafted and the LEMP is carried out, as approved and carried out, can we agree that then in that case, the long-term impact would be positive?
Provided that, yes, those two conditions you've just mentioned
Yeah.
are followed through.
Thank you. Then in relation to licenses, go on to say, towards the bottom of the paragraph, having regard to the scope for delivering mitigation, indeed enhancement for dormice as a result of the scale of the site, it's therefore reasonable to expect Natural England will grant a development licence consistently with the requirements of the regulations, as was the case for a similar scale of impacts on the phase 1 project, where a licence was granted. Yeah.
Yes.
And then we go down to page 3. See the text in green? Because we've been looking at the appellant's position there. Look at the green. The text makes the point that the text is in paragraph A is qualified by reference to the habitat site, but agreed with respect to paragraph B, which is what we're looking at.
I am just getting to the right page here. So
Sorry, yes, it's electronic page 3. We've got
Right,
no
electronic page 3.
numbered paragraphs. You see that?
um,
So there's a head, so that it's the page with which at the very top of the page, it's the end of the paragraph before, pronounce themselves satisfied as the first words on the page.
yes, I'm
Yeah.
there. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, and then heading SWT, Ecology
Yes,
Planning
yes,
Advice
right,
Service.
I've got it. Yes, thank you.
And then that first paragraph, the text is agreed with respect to paragraph B.
Just check paragraph B.
Yeah, that's what we've been looking at.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was the agreed position of the ecologists at the first inquiry, wasn't it? And it relied on the details of the scheme, which essentially you agree with, and the precedent of the phase 1 scheme.
That's
Yeah.
correct. Just to qualify our position, though, this document that was prepared, that the position statement from the Surrey Wildlife Trust prepared by Rob Hutchinson, says very clearly on the front page that it's valid until the, I think it's the 4th of the 1st, 2025. So that suggests that that statement is no longer valid.
Well, there's no such statement on this document, is there?
Not on this particular
This was
document here.
Mr.
No,
Hutchinson
no.
giving his view to the inspector the first time round as to whether or not in the future protected species licenses would be granted, isn't it? That's not
Yes,
qualified
or,
in any way.
unless conditions change or
Yeah.
further evidence comes to light.
Of course,
yes,
of course.
Which I understood was the position of the Surrey Wildlife Trust in making that
Yeah.
that statement about the validity of
Yeah,
their.
I'm sort of trying not to get
Yeah.
derailed on this one and go off
Yes.
but obviously an expert view being expressed as part of the inquiry process the first time round. You don't point to anything that suggests that there is a different position now in relation to what Natural England does or doesn't grant licenses for, do you?
No,
No. So, and you don't provide any view from any ecologist that those licenses wouldn't be granted, do you?
I would say that, no, but I should again like to qualify that our ecologists do have concerns about the adequacy of the mitigation strategy that has been put forward for the
Yep.
dormouse. And on that basis, we have concerns as to whether then the application would satisfy the test for
Right.
getting a license.
I mean, again, if there are additional mitigation measures that are proposed, those of course can be put forwards and taken into account by the council in approving any LEMP, and also taken into account by Natural England in agreeing any licenses, can't they? But at the
Yes.
moment, we don't have any additional mitigation suggestions.
Not at this point.
Thank you. On survey adequacy, then, 6.5, I mean, I think actually we've dealt with this. I'm going to leave this for Mr. Jack. Cat predation, you dealt with briefly in your evidence in chief. You've
Yes.
acknowledged that fragmentation is the major
Yes.
issue. And I think your position is that cat predation remains a contributory minor issue. Is that a sort of fair summary of what you said? So it's relevant, but it's not the main point.
It's certainly relevant, and that statement was made about the relevance in terms of the fact that there will be a significant new housing development being built in this site, and with that will come the additional pressures from cat predation.
Yeah. But you're not saying it's a primary driver of pressures on dormice.
No, it's not.
No.
As you say, the primary drivers are habitat loss and fragmentation.
Yeah. Thank you. And then dark skies, again, you addressed in evidence in chief, referred to the condition that's proposed. And I know that the Rule 6 party have some suggested additional wording in relation to that. Subject to a satisfactory condition being agreed, that resolves this issue, doesn't it?
It should do, yes.
Yeah, fine. And just for clarity, you also refer to the wording of condition 35 in relation to dormice. Were you saying that would, well, I think we've already been through that. So that's fine. I won't ask you any more on that. Okay, final topic then. Just in the proof at page 4, it explained who you are and why, what your role is, etc. And you've sort of spoken to that already. So you're the chair of Haslemere Biodiversity Group. That's right.
That's correct, yes.
Haslemere Biodiversity Group isn't formally part of the Rule 6 grouping, is it?
It's part of Haslemere Vision.
It's part of Haslemere Vision.
Yes.
So how does that work? Does it have any incorporation or any structure?
Well, Haslemere Biodiversity started out as a working group.
Yeah.
It was part of Haslemere Vision to assist with the development of neighbourhood plan. Once that task had been completed and the plan was delivered, then our group's work has carried on, but obviously with the main focus on biodiversity. And with that in mind, we have recently established ourselves as an independent not-for-profit entity, but we are still under the umbrella of Haslemere Vision in that we haven't formally separated from them yet. That will be happening in the next few months.
Right. Now, in Mr. Collins's proof for this inquiry, NID 5.1,
I'm there, yes.
Yeah. Appendix 12, correspondence.
What page, electronic page is that, please?
Apologies, I've got it separated out. Let me just. It should be right at the bottom, I think. I think it's possibly the last document in the whole proof. You found it. It's an email
Right.
basically. No, it's not quite the.
Now I've got it as page 131.
Oh, 131.
Thank you, sir.
File that.
Oh, that's,
Oh,
no, not, maybe. Ah, yes, 309, electronic page 309,
309.
309, yeah.
Is this the letter, email from Mr. Collins, 19th Feb?
That's right, so yes.
Right, same place.
Right, I'm nearly there.
You're there?
Nearly. Right, I'm here, yes.
Yeah. So this was an email. I don't know, first I should say, have you seen this email before? It was sent by Mr. Collins to Hazelmere South Residents Association and to Mr. Brown, seeking essentially clarification as to the identity of the Rule 6 parties and the processes by which they decided to join the Rule 6 case, essentially. Yeah.
Yes.
Have you seen it before?
I haven't personally seen it, but I'm aware that Mr. Brown received it, yes.
Okay. Over the page, questions asked at the bottom, 2E, about the Hazelmere vision. Suggestion put that from the website, it appears that Hazelmere vision itself is essentially moribund. Is that right? Has Hazelmere vision essentially ceased to function?
It still functions, but the main areas of activity that it now focuses on are biodiversity in the terms of our group's activities, and also the sustainable travel group.
Okay. What membership does it have?
Hazelmere Vision has a membership of 23.
23 people.
Yes.
And how many of those are part of Hazelmere Biodiversity?
Probably about 4.
4 of you. And what process was undertaken to decide to join the Rule 6 case and object to the scheme through this process?
We had, well, Hazelmere Vision had participated in a Rule 6 group previously for the phase 1 inquiry.
Yes, and for this scheme, what happened?
And for this scheme, I think we went through a similar process. That there was consultation with the members, or the members were alerted that the Hazelmere Vision was taking part in this process.
Before you joined?
Before
the decision was taken to join?
I think so, yes.
Okay. And was there a vote?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. Is this relevant?
Well, it's relevance to the status of what the Rule 6 party is representing, essentially. Thank you. No further questions from me. Thank you very much, Dr. Kest.
Thanks very much, Mr. Dale-Harris. Mr. Brown, any re-examination?
I'll just ask just one point, if I can raise one, Dr. Guest. Do you consider the appellant's proposed strategy, which involves dormice travelling over the ground, to be acceptable?
We briefly discussed this.
Yes, just if I get the answer.
I would not personally support it as a main assumption that dormice will be able to safely do that, and that I think my position would be that there should be alternative strategies to ensure that they can safely cross a road through the aerial canopy routes and other options if necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Brown, and thank you very much. Okay, I think we're now, sorry, we're now switching over sorry, are we getting a lot of feedback? I'm getting some. We're now switching over to your next witness, please. So if you can do a swap. In chief, I think you were looking, oh, the one point I do need to raise. I think you were looking at a couple of hours in chief. Is that still?
I'd hope not. I would hope not a couple of hours, maybe an hour. So
Okay. If it's going to be about an hour, run through the evidence in chief, and then we'll break for lunch. The point that I was going to raise, going back to the Rule 6 evidence, the timeline of ecological assessments document that was handed in, I've only glanced at it, but we haven't referred to it at all. I don't know what the appellant thinks of it, because obviously we've not looked at it before. But I mean, does that help me, Mr. Brown?
Yes, we believe it does help.
But your witness hasn't referenced it. I mean, she may well have referenced items in it, but
I believe she did, but as a document in its own right, it's helpful, I believe. It shows the timeline of where things were done and when they were completed.
I appreciated from my glance that it was effectively, as you say, a
Yeah.
timeline, that this happened on such and such a date. Mr. Dale Harris, you may not have had a chance to look at it.
I haven't had a significant chance to look at it. I don't understand that we have any immediate concerns as to its accuracy. I do wonder, sir, though, if the purpose is to set out an accurate timeline. I mean, we haven't discussed it with the witness because she didn't talk about it in her evidence in chief. I wonder whether it would be better for essentially us to agree a timeline of survey documentation, which we can do with the Rule 6 party. And then you have a record. I mean, there is, amongst other things, there's a table in Mr. Jack's proof, which essentially does a large part of that work. But, you know, if we agree a timeline with them, then we essentially can make sure that everything is on there that they and we want you to be aware of.
Yeah, let's do it that way. I mean, this document's fine, but let's get an agreed document based on this, or indeed based
happy
on
with that.
Mr. Jack.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I won't take that in as a document, and I'll wait to hear from the parties about an agreed version. Okay, it's useful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll ask Mr. Jack to set himself up. So in the meantime, we've got an ecology statement of common ground printed now, sir.
Now I've got, I haven't looked at it, but I've been sent the draft ecology statement. Is that the same, or have we got a final one?
This is signed and final. I imagine what you've been sent, sir, is identical, but I suggest that we don't look at whatever you've been sent and you rely on this.
Got that. Okay, yes, if I could have that in, that would be useful. Thanks.
So I wanted, since Mr. Jack's getting himself set up,
Yeah.
could we have a 3-minute
Yeah,
break?
sure.
So I can...
Yeah, just give it 5 minutes whilst we're settling. Okay, let's resume with the next witness then, please.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Jack, or good afternoon, in fact. Can you confirm that you are Chris Jack?
Yes,
And you're the principal ecological consultant at EPR?
yes,
You've provided to the inquiry, we've got your proof of evidence, and we've got a rebuttal. And we'll also, regard to the statement of common ground, which has gone in, which you're one of the signatories to, Mr. Iceland. Yeah.
yes,
You give your professional qualifications at 1.2. You hold a BSc in Conservation and Wildlife Management, and you're a full member of Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management.
yes.
Been working in ecology for about 15 years. You summarise some of your recent experience at 1.3 and 1.4, including particular expertise in collating information for HRA, habitats, regulations, assessments, and acting as an expert witness in relation to air quality effects on internationally designated conservation sites, work on various recreational impact mitigation schemes, SANG, and then at 1.4, a substantial proportion of your practice is concerned the quantification of BNG. You also explain there that you also carry out various other types of ecological survey and assessment work and hold survey class license registrations for bats and great crested newts.
Yes.
Correct, isn't it? When did you first become involved in this scheme?
EPR was first appointed in relation to the now consented first phase of development in 2021, and we've been on the appeal scheme since March 2022, I believe.
Yeah.
And a lot of that work's been led by my colleague Ben Kites, who's produced the a statement which is appended to my main proof.
Yeah.
And that sets out, you know, the HRA and the SANG position in particular. So the main thrust of our involvement has been in HRA matters. It's diversified a little bit. We've produced the Alpine LEMP, SANG creation and management plan. And here I am now of Engain, who we've discussed. Matt Davis, obviously, was the evidence witness to the first inquiry. You know, obviously his proof is an important document, and I'm taking over from him.
Yeah, because you explain at 1.9, he's unable to contribute to this inquiry, so you've been appointed to fulfil a broader ecology brief.
Precisely.
Now, I think it would be useful to begin by dealing with the SANG aspect of the evidence. I think our key documents for that, not sure whether we'll need to go to all of them or just give reference, but we've also got Mr. Kite's statement, which I think will be our primary guide. And the inspector will also just want to note, and we'll see whether we need to turn it up, CD 5.47, which is the Habitats Regulation Assessment of Local Plan Part 2. Yeah. So do you want to start by just giving kind of brief technical background to what we're talking about in SANG? Don't know how experienced the inspector is in this particular issue, which does crop up all over the place, but assuming that he's reading in from scratch, do you want to just explain why we're talking about SANG, what's it for, and how does it work?
So the SANG requirement.
I wonder if the microphone is possibly just a little far from you.
Fairly softly spoken. Shout at your ad.
So this arises from the proximity of the site to the Wealden Heaths Phase 2 Special Protection Area, which is an international level designation made in the basis of its important populations of 3 specialist heath and bird species, which because of their nesting habitats are vulnerable to the effects of recreational disturbance, dog walkers, other such activity. So sort of zone of impact or recreational catchment of the SBA is put at 5 kilometres based on visitor survey data, etc. And obviously we're about 2.2 kilometres away at this location. So the sort of policy position or the strategic level position on the Wealdon Heaths is set out in the HRA of the Local Plan Part 2, which you've just mentioned. I don't know if we necessarily need to go to the document, but it is summarised in Mr. Kite's statement. So the sort of agreed approach in Waverley is a graduated approach, and that's on the basis of Natural England's advice, essentially. So this is a different and rather laxer approach than applies in other areas like the Thames Basin Heaths. And essentially what that constitutes is that proposed developments of fewer than 20 units are considered unlikely to need litigation. Larger developments of up to 49 units may require some form of litigation, which is often described as a heathland infrastructure project, and that's generally a more localised recreational enhancement by providing some footpath upgrades, car parking, something like that. And then it's larger developments of 50 plus units are considered that they may require SANG, although that is caveated to say in this HRA document that SANG doesn't necessarily need to be compliant with Natural England's guidelines for the creation of SANG, which originates from the Thames Basin East region, as long as it's considered to provide a reasonably attractive green space. So this, in my view, is a slightly problematic approach, and I think there's recognition of that from Natural England increasingly, because it obviously potentially means that no mitigation is required when development comes forward in the form of smaller discrete projects, irrespective of the overall in combination effect. And Mr. Kite's done his own assessment of this. It's 4.16 his appendix. So he's looked at the total housing delivery target for Hazelmere and puts that at 1,060 units. And he, by a sort of process of elimination, he feels that 673 of those are likely to come forward as small schemes below the threshold of 20 units. So this graduated approach is actually, allowing a significant in combination effect made up of smaller scale projects that will collectively introduce a lot of new residents, a lot of new recreational activity.
Yeah. And on that, Mr. Kite refers to an email from Natural England in relation to their approach to these kinds of schemes and this kind of issue. What is that, page 71?
Yes, page 71, electronic page 71 of my proof. And that's reflective of the recent hardening in Natural England's position. It confirms that going forwards, they'll be assessing SANG proposals in the Wealdon Heaths catchment on the basis of the Thames Basin Heaths guidelines, which are much more demanding. One of the key criteria in the Thames Basin Heaths region has always been the provision of a minimum circular walking route of 2.3 kilometres, and that obviously requires a certain minimum size of SANG to properly accommodate. One of the sort of fallout from this change of or this hardening of Natural England's approach is reflected in a relatively recent Natural England objection to the proposed development at the Royal Junior School in Hazelmere, which is DS06, and that's on the basis that it fails to provide a compliant SANG. So, and really, there's no scope to do that within the parameters of that development. It's too small, too constrained. So that's
Yeah, just to help the inspector, can you keep trying to give him references as we go, so he doesn't have to type too much. That's 3.14 of Mr. Kite's statement deals particularly with that point.
Precisely.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.
Yeah. So there's evidence that a sort of shortage of strategic solutions is impeding delivery of planned development.
Thank you. Now, turning to what's proposed in this appeals scheme, do you want to just talk the inspector through? I suppose firstly, there's been some discussion of what was secured under phase one, the differences between phase one and what's now proposed, and then also if you could deal with the distinction between the detailed SANG proposal and the larger SANG proposal, which the appellant I understand is willing to commit to applying for.
Of course. So the solution for phase one, this was the approved solution, was not to provide a SANG, but to provide a 2.3 kilometre circular walking route that runs through the current appeal site. So this was not a green space. It was simply a circular walk that residents could use. So that's something you would, going back to the categories I discussed previously, that's more in the line of a Heathland infrastructure project. It's clearly not a SANG. So if the appeal is upheld, that will be superseded by a fully compliant SANG, and what the appellant initially proposed, and this is the detailed SANG you referred to, is a 9.69 hectare site. As I say, fully meeting the need for a 2.3 kilometre circular walk and other relevant criteria. What's now proposed, and the appellant proposes to commit to this, is to provide a larger SANG. This is obviously within the framework of the application site and the parameters of the development, which would be at or above 12 hectares.
And that's explained in a bit more detail at 3.25, Mr. Kite's statement, isn't it?
Indeed.
Key point being that the reduction in dwelling numbers has changed the open space requirements, and so allows for more of the land to be designated as SANG. Is that right?
Precisely. That's where the opportunity has arisen from, essentially. So the 12 hectare SANG, which is now proposed or intended to be proposed, that far exceeds the mitigation requirements of the appeal scheme. There's headroom for another additional 464 dwellings, and that's over and beyond both the appeal scheme and phase one.
Yeah, and beyond the number of dwellings which the SANG could mitigate, it might be useful for the inspector to look at maps 1 and 2 as appended to Mr. Kite's statement.
Indeed.
Also, just to give them a sense of where the SPA is in relation to our site, where existing residential properties are, because of course the functionality of the SANG is connected to its ability to attract people from their homes to come and walk their dogs or whatever in the SANG.
Yeah.
And then map 2, I think is probably the key one. But do you want to just talk the inspector through those two plans?
Indeed. So two of the things to note on this are there's various buffer lines or radii on both plans, and those represent obviously linear distance of either 2 or 4 meters, kilometers rather, from the SANG boundary, and this arises from the proposed increase in SANG size. So the catchment of a SANG, the area which is considered capable of serving, is related to its size. Larger sites are regarded as more of a draw, essentially.
More attractive to people, so they'll
Precisely.
travel further to come and use them.
Precisely. So the elevation in SANG area to 12 hectares increases the driving catchment of the SANG. Of course, there's a SANG car park, as we know, proposed, increases up to 4 kilometres. So, and obviously the significance of this is it increases the area in which the SANG can be used as mitigation, essentially. And what you can see on map 2 is it covers all of the local plan part 2 Hazelmere allocations in that area. So both in terms of capacity and catchment, the SANG has a fairly significant value as a strategic solution. So this is discussed a little. I don't think we need to go into too much detail at 4.15 of Mr. Kite's statement. He points out that in addition to potentially unlocking planned development, stalled schemes, the SANG would also be capable of mitigating the very small schemes which currently don't require mitigation, but which collectively have the potential to have the greatest effect on the SPA, as we've discussed. And map 1 is obviously slightly different to map 2. We'll put it with me. But the significance of map 1 essentially is it shows you existing addresses or postcodes within the within the respective radii or catchments, and there's I think what it demonstrates is there's over 9,600 existing addresses in that 4 kilometre area. So that's a benefit in relation to the SPA, because obviously the baseline pressure from those dwellings has the potential to be mitigated through the SANG. But I think it also goes to the broader recreational benefits as a substantial piece of public realm and an attractive destination that the SANG would provide. And one of the points Mr. Kite makes on that note is that the SANG has the potential to function as a gateway, if you will, to the national park, because there's direct access essentially into the open access land to the south. And essentially he makes an analysis of driving times in relation to the current position, or with the opportunity for people to park in the SANG and walk, and finds that it's certainly facilitating the use and enjoyment of that off-site land, in addition to being an attractive destination in its own right.
Thank you. Now, in relation to the SANG, Mr. Kite also deals with Inspector Bristow's conclusions following the first inquiry. That was one of the areas on which his decision was challenged.
Yes.
1.23 of Mr. Kite's proof sets out, I think, the key parts of the report. Just to explain, I think, for the inspector now what the appellant's position is and what your view is of what was Inspector Bristow's conclusions in that respect. Point 1, paragraph 156 of the decision letter, point made that SANG provision could contribute to delivery of LPP2 sites. Paragraph 157, he begins by saying, however, there appears to be at least some SANG capacity elsewhere, albeit fast running out at Farnham and limited at Sturt Farm. Firstly, just pausing on that, what's your view in relation to SANG capacity elsewhere, so far as the appellant or you are aware?
Sorry, I might need you to bear with me very briefly, because my laptop is failing. Yes, thank you. So I think for the purposes of the current inquiry, the question is really, were these benefits appropriately weighed in the first decision, and was the inspector properly advised about those benefits?
Yeah.
And sort of going to the point you make, part of the background to this is some misleading and unhelpful advice from Natural England, the statutory consultee. So there's a letter to PINS of the 4th of December 2024, which I believe is PDF page 59. And that stated that Natural England are uncertain of the additional green space benefits that this scheme would deliver, noting phase 1 alone is delivering recreational green space in perpetuity. And obviously that's simply incorrect. The phase 1 scheme was simply just a path route. It wasn't an accessible green space. There was no broader right of access or enjoyment over the rest of the land. So there's a subsequent email from Natural England of the 7th of April, and that has essentially acknowledged, albeit rather begrudgingly, that advice was incorrect on the basis that I've set out.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. And that further email you're talking about, seeing, unfortunately, not yet up on the website. So, but that's the new email, which has come in. Mr. Kite also explains and deals with the 7th of March response from Natural England, which confirms, in relation to queries set out by Mr. Kite in his earlier email of the 3rd of February, that Scotland Park's the only proposal that's capable of delivering a SANG that's been approved by Natural England as not only being sufficient to prevent the impacts of the Scotland Park proposals on the SPA, but also provides significant surplus SANG capacity to help prevent the impacts of all the other allocated sites in the local plan.
That's right. Yeah.
So insofar as the inspector might have been understanding Natural England as not agreeing with that potential for strategic mitigation, they've now confirmed that that's not their position.
They've now confirmed, and Mr. Kite's statement refers 1.23, I think, to the Bristow decision, and at 1.56 of that decision, the inspector did acknowledge that the SANG could contribute to delivery of the LPP2 applications, but noted there was at least some remaining capacity elsewhere. Referred particularly to Farnham Park and Sturt Farm, and that understanding is not correct. Farnham Park is 15 kilometres from Hazelmere. There's no overlap in the recreational catchment, and it's intended to serve a different special protection area, the Thames Basin Heaths.
Yeah, sorry. So that's just make sure the inspector's called that point. So Farnham Park is serving a different SPA, so it's mitigating effects on an entirely different ecological receptor.
Indeed,
Yeah.
Indeed, yeah.
And then Sturt Farm? And
Sturt Farm is far too small to meet the Thames Basin Heath SANG guidelines. There's obviously not capable of accommodating the circular walk length requirement. So it's essentially not suitable as a strategic solution.
Thank you. Let's now turn to surveys, which is, there's a sort of a point running through a number of the Rule 6 parties' positions, discussed in, not discussed in much detail with Dr. Guest this morning on the basis of her bits of the proof that she was particularly dealing with, but the points being made by, I think essentially by Dr. Mathers, that the BAT survey and the Great Crested Newt surveys may not either be up to date or sufficiently comprehensive. Do you want to just explain Firstly, I think it would be useful just to take the inspector through a broad, in brief terms, a bit of an overview of the ecological work that's been done. And it may be useful to do that while we have your table 2.2, your main proof to hand, which creates a sort of framework for the resolution of issues between the appellant and the council through Surrey Wildlife Trust.
Yes. So the proposal, as
So just to help the inspector, it's table 2.2 is at page 13 of your brief.
So the assessment's been informed by two comprehensive survey programs. The first largely occurring in 2018 and the second in 2022, with some further updates in 2023. The key sort of documents communicating that assessment are Chapter 9 of the Environmental Statement, which is CD 2.28, and then there's a technical appendix survey report there too, which has been updated. So there's a second version of that.
Yeah. So CD 2.28 and CD 2.38, those both went in with the original application. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And 48 followed essentially once some outstanding work had been completed.
What was the outstanding work referred to there?
It was the surveys which extend across, a larger part of the field program. So that's dormouse surveys, bat activity surveys. Not all those visits have been completed by the time of the application submission, which is not exceptional by any means.
Thank you. And then going forwards through the process, what else was done?
So the sort of conclusions of that assessment briefly are at 9.10 of the chapter. Says there'll be no significant effects on ecological receptors, and at 9.7 it discusses various beneficial effects, including significant quantity of measurable biodiversity net gain and increases in the quality and quantity of habitats for bats, birds and dormice.
Thank you. And then I think there was a further standalone report in 2023 at CD 12.3, isn't it?
That's correct. Yes, that was some further update bat survey work and great crested root surveys.
Yeah,
reported in that.
And so if we look at your table 2.2,
yes,
how did it work in terms of what stages, well, what issues or which issues resolved to the satisfaction of Surrey Wildlife Trust, and on basis of what information?
Very good. So one of the concerns was lack of the missing or outstanding survey data. So and that was one of the last to be ticked off the list. I think if you look at the top 5 rows up on the table, they're the ones which were not resolved until the 4th of January. So the colourful columns essentially are the dates of the formal consultation responses which Surrey Wildlife Trust provided on this application, with the last one essentially representing their final position going into the previous appeal.
Yeah, so we see that in relation to the impact on the wildlife corridors, adequacy of bat surveys, need for an outline reptile mitigation strategy, need for an outline hazel dormouse mitigation strategy, and a need to update the survey information impact assessment, that was all resolved by 4th of January.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And generally, these points are all matters of providing further information, whether that's survey results or more
Yep.
detail of mitigation.
And for the inspector, you can look at your final column there to see where the information is that resulted in SWT resolving that the issue had been satisfied for their purposes.
That's right.
And we looked with Dr. Guest, we looked at the response to the inspector's questions actually at the inquiry as well. So that's another source.
Indeed.
Now, the Rule 6 parties say in their proof of evidence, they refer to a statement, an advice note from SIAM, your professional body, which talks about the risk of early surveys becoming out of date beyond 18 months, I think is the relevant threshold.
Yes.
But refer to that statement refers to the need for further surveys being something to be considered by a professional ecologist who will need to undertake a site visit and may also need to update desk study information. What's been done subsequent to in preparation for this inquiry, and what have you done in terms of confirming or considering the need for additional surveys?
I think one thing to note on that first is this advice note is specifically concerned the risk of early ecological surveys taken early in the design process becoming out of date due to the time taken between scoping and submission of a planning application. This is obviously a different circumstance when we're dealing with effectively an elongated determination period. But that's a moot point really, because we're still essentially compliant with the sort of framework that this note prescribes, which is update walkover surveys. Those have been undertaken both by myself last month and earlier in the year by Engain, with the objective of identifying any sort of significant changes in the condition of the site or its suitability to support protected species, and thereby confirm whether the conclusions of the submitted assessment were likely to continue to hold true.
In terms of any need for further surveys, what's your position?
There's no further predetermination requirements upon the proposal. That's the agreed position with the Wildlife Trust and with the council. So as it stands, there's no imminent requirement to do that. There is, of course, a reassessment strategy for pre-commencement work for things like bat roosts and badgers, but that's almost a form of mitigation, essentially, rather than gathering new information.
Would that include anything in relation to dormice?
No, not classically. No.
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 So how would the dormice mitigation proposals work?
This is set out I'm understanding the question in relation to their protected species status, which would, that's why those surveys would arise for bats and badgers. And the approach for dormice is rather different. It would be licensed vegetation clearance undertaken according to one of two approved methods, which essentially require clearing the vegetation in phases and at suitable times of the year.
So no need for further surveys in that range.
Precisely.
We've dealt with the position of the Surrey Wildlife Trust in a bit of detail. I don't know if you think you need to say anything more in relation to that.
Possibly, I think that's the table somewhat speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And it does demonstrate that this proposal and the assessment has been subject to an extensive process of consultation.
Yeah.
With these four formal responses. I know there was also a separate meeting between SWT and Engain and a joint site walkover as well. So the proposal has been scrutinised quite thoroughly and over an extensive period of time.
And in terms of further updated position from them. I mean, the Rule 6 party has made a point as in relation to, I think, their 4th of January 2024 response, that it's got some language in it that says, you know, this response is valid for a period of a year. I mean, what has the appellant done in terms of seeking to engage with SWT to update its position, or where do you understand things have got to?
Yeah, I think it's pretty useful to understand that the wording in that consultation response will be boilerplate, essentially, something that will be included in the Wildlife Trust consultation response, as a matter of course, to limit the sort of period of reliance where relevant. Another key thing to reiterate is the Wildlife Trust have not been involved in the proposal as a consultee in their own right. It's their role as contracted ecology advisors to the council. Essentially, you know, the provision of advice from them sort of, you know, comes at the behest from the council, and in my view, that agreement that's represented in the final Wildlife Trust position statement, it is effectively, if not superseded, but brought forward into the statement of common ground with the council, which confirms that the proposal is acceptable in nature conservation terms. I have been in touch with Mr. Hutchinson, who was council's ecology expert at the last inquiry. He didn't know a great deal about the redetermination appeal, and that consultation hasn't really gone anywhere. So not a great deal more to say about that.
Thank you. Okay, local wildlife corridors. Do you want to just? I think we've heard a bit about them already. What do you understand their purpose and basis to be?
I think obviously we've had Dr. Guest very helpfully sort of characterise some of the background to this process. It's also set out at 3.81 of the neighbourhood plan, which is CD 6.3, I think, and that reiterates essentially that these two relatively local consultants were commissioned to undertake a largely desk-based exercise to identify key ecological features and wildlife corridors within the round the plan area, and these corridors are described at 3.81 as putative wildlife corridors, in the sense that it's based on a interpretation of the landscape and connecting habitats that could play a role in linking particular features such as designated sites or priority habitats.
This morning, Dr. Guest, we talked about the ground truthing report that's been prepared in relation to the wildlife corridors, local wildlife corridors within this site, and she also explained that this methodology is, well, in relation to the woodland areas, it is basically being applied, I think, as and when funds allow and options arise, to other parts of the local wildlife corridor network. We don't have any information as to those studies, but could you just comment on the methodology shown in the ground truthing exercise that we have for the site, and what that can or can't show us about the function of the local wildlife corridor network more generally?
I think that ground truthing report is a very straightforward characterization of the habitats, defining them in BNG terms essentially, and applying a condition level. It doesn't go beyond that for me in discussing their importance or their potential value as supporting habitats.
Thank you. Another issue discussed with Dr. Guest in the context of the particular corridors affected by the site, and particularly the western corridor, or the proposal, and particularly the western corridor, was primacy of east-west connections across the Midhurst Road versus north-south, and I think she accepted that the east-west connection was the primary concern, particularly in relation to dormice. That, I think, is a position you'd already set out in your rebuttal evidence. Do you want to please explain to the inspector why that is, just so he understands your view on that?
Indeed. So essentially, if we look at things longitudinally or latitudinally, the north-south habitat corridors at this location are clearly less important, and Dr. Guest has rightly agreed with that, simply because they're leading to the existing settlement, and in some cases right into the high street. Generally the more important corridors or potential areas of connectivity are on the east-west axis, around the southern edge of the town, particularly in the river valley, and then there's enormous swathes of woodland to the east and the southwest. So for me, that's the key access for promoting habitat connectivity in this location.
And with that in mind, do you want to just kind of run through the key points you would make in terms of the impacts of the scheme on those corridors, both negative and positive?
Indeed. So the main impacts, as Dr. Guest has related, are effectively arise from the tree removal required to provide road access into and through the site, and that's effectively cutting through those north-south corridors, and obviously which we're in agreement are generally less important, less potentially valuable. The benefits of the scheme in terms of connectivity are more apparent and more responsive to the opportunities for promoting connectivity on that east-west axis, particularly within the woodland and the sort of slopes of the grassland on the valley floor, and the wetland proposals for that area.
Thank you. That issue, of course, was raised through reason for refusal 2 and resolved with the council. I don't think we need to go back through that, but again, just do you want to pull out what you say are the main pieces of evidence from Mr. Davies' view as set out, which formed the basis for Surrey Wildlife Trust's agreement that the issue could be managed satisfactorily within the scheme of the appeal proposal?
Indeed. So this mostly arises from Mr. Davies' proof, ID 2.6, I believe, and there were two sort of broad points essentially, which provided the basis for agreement on this point. One was essentially providing more information, more detailed evaluation of the effects, and also putting them into perspective, as we've discussed today, in terms of the more limited importance of the north-south corridors for wildlife dispersal. And the second point was more detail of mitigation. So, and again, we've heard quite a lot about this, but that obviously included the advanced compensatory planting proposals to try and restore that canopy cover in the roadside area where it will be affected. A commitment to provide a sensitive lighting strategy, and Mr. Davies in his proof provides a figure of proposed dark corridors, which essentially comports with the HEN corridors. And the third point, as we've discussed, is the wildlife tunnel.
And are you satisfied that these features can be secured via a condition or series of conditions?
Yes, and that was the Wildlife Trust's recommendation in their January 2024 position statement.
Okay, now I think we were going to at this point run through some of the sort of residual Rule 6 party points of concern. Following the evidence of Dr. Guest, do you want to just set out where you see the position as we've got to between you and Dr. Guest
Indeed, so
in relation to the wildlife corridors?
well, yeah, and obviously setting aside the direct effects of the road provision. I think one of the other main points, which is raised in the Rule 6 proof, is this dichotomy being outside or within settlement, and Dr. Guest explained that arises from a perception, very likely a reality, that in urban and suburban areas, boundary vegetation is less semi-natural and it's more ornamental. I fully accept that's likely to be the case. I don't necessarily follow Dr. Guest to the conclusion that effectively extending the settlement boundary would somehow cause the existing semi-natural features, the tree lines, to transition into a different habitat type. And of course, we've discussed and agreed today that there are mechanisms to protect these retained habitats from these potentially urbanizing effects, such as prescriptions in the LEMP and the same management plan. And I understand Dr. Guest agrees that those mechanisms can be effective at avoiding these occupation phase effects.
Thank you. In relation to veteran trees, I think we've established that it was one of the trees down in the southern end of the site, which was discussed at the previous inquiry, which was dealt with through a document from Sightline. Do you have any additional comments, or are you happy to just leave it there?
Well, obviously, I'm familiar with the arboricultural evaluation that was provided in our appendix, and I agree with its conclusion. I don't think specifically in relation to that tree, but in general, 193C of the NPPF provides a very high level of policy protection, but that's intended to cover veteran trees of exceptional value, not just any large tree with old growth features. And my opinion is that none of the vegetation in that affected part of the corridor warrants that protection.
Thank you. Dormice, I think we've substantially covered in terms of talking about the local wildlife corridor. But do you just want to pull together for the inspector? I mean, I think we've agreed that in the long term, the proposals offer potential for positive effects on dormice. That's, I think, agreed with Dr. Guest. In the construction phase or in the shorter term, what would be potential effects and how would those be mitigated, and what would your overall conclusion be on them?
The construction phase effects are essentially the immediate habitat loss and fragmentation, but particularly for the provision of road access. Now, you dug out the communication from Robert Hutchinson earlier, and he agreed that those were relatively small scale and outweighed by the longer benefits, and I would share that view. I think the significance of those impacts is moderated by various factors, one which we've discussed, and I won't harp on about this anymore. I think it's an agreed matter that the northward habitat connections, for obvious reasons, are probably not terribly important for dormice to need to visit Central Hazelmere. Another factor is that the removal of vegetation from one side of the Midhurst Road will not prevent dormice dispersing. And even if this were not the case, this is, this is some of the evidence cited in my rebuttal, which Dr. Guest has mentioned today, and which she agrees with. The provision of minor access roads is not a significant obstacle to dormouse dispersal. The A30 study we mentioned, which is by two of the most preeminent dormice ecologists in the country, concluded that even roads of up to 12 metres should not be seen as barriers to dormice movement. So for all these reasons, and even setting aside the positive net effects of the habitat creation, I share the view essentially of Surrey Wildlife Trust that these impacts are relatively minor.
Yeah, and just on the tunnel, where does that come into the picture?
So the tunnel, as I say, was essentially brought forward in Mr. Davies's proof as part of this mitigation measure. It's been presented. I'm not saying intentionally necessarily as a specific mitigation requirement for dormice, and the Rule 6 party have said that they don't think that will be effective. So that's not quite an accurate characterisation. The tunnel was proposed. The wording in Mr. Davies's proof, I think, is repeated in the Wildlife Trust's final consultation response. It's just to facilitate the movement of wildlife along the corridor rather than for a particular species. And Mr. Davies says that it's most likely to benefit terrestrial species such as I believe he cites toads and hedgehogs and slow worms. He then goes on to say that dormice could be encouraged to use the tunnel by the method he discusses. And I should know that's not an entirely left field suggestion. The use of underpass crossings and tunnels is discussed in the Dormouse Conservation Handbook. I accept it's not a it's not a widely practiced form of mitigation in the same way as a badger tunnel might be, for example, but it's not entirely novel either. And I also cite in my rebuttal some recent studies discussing the provision of dormouse bridges in underpasses to mitigate very large road schemes. But that's a secondary point in my view, and this is clearly set out by Mr. Davies, is that dormice wouldn't be reliant on the tunnel because there is still, the Midhurst Road corridor is formed by the vegetation to both sides, and as we've discussed, there will be crossing points remaining. So essentially, clearly there'll be some level of impacts to this level of quantity of tree removal, but the access proposals won't significantly impinge on the ability of dormice to use that corridor. And just to make that particularly clear, Mr. Davies's actual expression, I think this is 4.20 of his proof, was that the wildlife tunnel could provide an alternative route. It was definitely not for dormice. It was definitely not, and never has been, Plan A.
Yeah, and that's your view as well.
Indeed.
Yeah. At the operational stage, after establishment, we've talked about the impacts, the positive impacts of proposed woodland management and diversification and the restoration of canopy where it might be lost for a period of time. I think the only other issue then is cats. I think Dr. Guest accepted it wasn't a primary driver of pressures on dormice. What's your view in relation to additional predation from increased numbers of cats living on the site?
Yes, I agree. It's not something which we would, characterise as representing a significant effect. And I provide some evidence for this in my rebuttal in terms of studies that have been done, and again the Dormouse Conservation Handbook, which both states that cats very rarely predate dormice. Cats can climb trees, obviously, but then they don't generally have their paws free to catch arboreal mice. So it obviously does happen to some extent, but it's it wouldn't be expected to change to occasion a change essentially in the conservation status of that population.
Thank you. Mitigation licenses. Again, you've set out some detail on that. Your response to what the Rule 6 party said in your rebuttal evidence. I mean, just to give a sense to the inspector, I mean, how many of these kind of licenses are granted annually? How common are they?
So Natural England grants over 1,000 European protected species mitigation licenses per annum. That's for all EPS. Is not just dormice, I should say, and that would include many householder extension size projects that affect bats. So the tests imposed by the habitat regulations are not that difficult to meet. Essentially, as we've discussed, the license was of course granted for phase 1, and clearly there's no real reasonable reason to think that it wouldn't be granted in this case.
And obviously the inspector, we've looked today at the position of the first inquiry between the witnesses at that stage.
Precisely, explicitly agreed.
Bats, great crested newts. Do you want to I think there's not an awful lot between us, but do you want to just comment on the need for further survey work in relation to either of those? I know we've touched on this briefly, but any additional points you want to bring out?
Sure. There's for bats there is a reassessment strategy which would be looking for potential tree roots which could obviously be destroyed during clearance. So that's essentially a protected species requirement. For GCN, there's the sort of basis for the conclusion of likely absence is more connected to the difficulties they would have in getting on site if they are present in the vicinity, which is unknown. We know it states in the Hazelwood Biodiversity Audit, authored by Mr. Mathis and Dr. Sutton, that many species have disappeared, such as the water vole, which is once common on the River Bay, and the great crested newt, which has not been recorded in the David Plan area for many years. So
yeah, and as at 2.78 of your rebuttal proof, you refer to Surrey Amphibian and Reptile Group's consultation response.
Yeah, so they gave a sort of probability rating to Engain, which was 0.0% of GCN presence. So taking that into account, and the barriers to dispersal in the form of the Riverway, then I think we can be reasonably satisfied with with that conclusion. And I explained in my rebuttal, it's never possible to completely exclude the risk of harm, but in this case, the risk is low enough to be acceptable, and Surrey Wildlife Trust specifically agreed to that in one of their consultation responses, which I think is CD 3.25. Risk of harm during construction is small and can be managed through a CHEM.
I think our final topic, I'm aware we're running up into my hour, but final topic, biodiversity net gain. Again, we've been through it in a bit more detail perhaps than we were expecting this morning with Dr. Guest. Do you want just to again run the inspector through the outlines of what has been what has been done to assess biodiversity net gain, what's been agreed, and what the kind of key drivers, I suppose, of the measured increase in habitat and hedgerow units are?
Certainly. So we've agreed, of course, that the proposal preceded the statutory requirement for BNG. So this was offered on a policy basis using the form of the metric, which was current at the time of that assessment. But essentially, otherwise the same calculator that's applied today in an updated version. And this is set out in the biodiversity net gain and enhancement strategy, which is CD 2.49. And this exercise determined that there would be a 33% net gain in habitat units and a 24% net gain in hedgerow units. It's obviously difficult to quantify these figures in a way that's very meaningful, but the overall uplift was 40 habitat units that's been projected, and it seems very distasteful to put this in financial terms, but the theoretical value of that would be £1 million essentially, allowing for an average cost of market price of a habitat unit of 20,000. And there's also discussion at the previous inquiry of the scope for releasing some of those excess units to offset other local development. And I think those were defined in the previous draft 106 agreement as anything above 20%. So proposal would already be making double the current statutory requirement before essentially offloading those additional benefits over and beyond that figure.
Thank you. There's obviously condition 38, I think, in relation to the approval of a final BNG strategy, and we may discuss the 106 provisions in the relevant session. Just on this point about conifer removal, I took Dr. Guest, I think, to some of the key kind of excerpts from the CD 2.49. I mean, what's your view on that?
Yes, I must admit I don't really understand the basis for the Rule 6 party's view that this would be harmful to biodiversity. I've cited a lot of contrary guidance in my rebuttal, including Forestry Commission guidance and practice guides, guidance on managing woodland for dormice, and even the higher level stewardship scheme, which quite literally pays people to do this in order to realise the nature conservation benefits of replacing a conifer plantation with a mixed native broadleaf woodland. So I must admit, I'm as a practitioner, I'm very satisfied that that's the right thing to do. But in terms of its contribution to the BNG picture, this is actually quite modest. And obviously, you went through this with some rather torturous mathematics earlier today, but I make it around 1.3 habitat units from that particular intervention in the context of an overall uplift of 40. So it's actually quite a small contributor, and obviously that's because this is an area weighted calculation, and this is a relatively modest area, given, given the scale of the open space available here.
And then I suppose just to round off, I mean, it's a weighted scale, it's weighted to area, which obviously makes sense given talk about habitats, and size of the habitats is going to be pretty important. I mean, just again to sort of step back a bit with a slightly wider lens and look at the scheme and the scale of broader woodland management to be delivered. And what would you say, I suppose, is your sort of final point for the inspector to take away in relation to the significance of that management in ecological terms?
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the most, clearly and strongly significant benefits of the proposal in ecological terms. And this is all about the importance of putting woodlands back into active silvicultural management, which essentially maintains diversity of their structure and composition, as opposed to letting them all sort of devolve into what we see today on site. So I think I refer in my rebuttal to Natural England's State of the Natural Environment in the South East report from 2008, stated that the cessation of that traditional silvicultural method, such as thinning trees, coppicing, was the most important adverse factor affecting the condition of our woodlands. And this is also borne out at the local level as well. In Surrey Hills management plan, there's a section on woodland in that, and the woodland management policies 1 to 3 are all directly concerned with promoting the reinstitution of active woodland management.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jack. I've got no further questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Dale Harris. Before we break for lunch, can I just pick up on one thing, just to make sure I got my note right, and I'm not sure I did. You were talking about the Surrey Wildlife Trust, effectively contracted to the council, made their views known at an earlier stage, etc., etc. You then made reference to a conversation you'd had with them more recently in relation to this redetermination inquiry, but I wasn't quite sure what you were saying that the gist of that conversation.
Yeah, it was a short conversation. We were simply trying to ascertain if they were likely to be producing an updated position statement, and
they said no. Okay, I thought that was it, but I just wanted to double check that. Okay, thanks very much indeed for that. It's 10 past. Let's resume.
So sorry to interrupt you, says me.
Oh,
Forgive.
voice
No, apologies. A voice of some kind. So can I just flag up, and I'll discuss them all if we never lunch. There are a couple of issues raised in that which relates to SANG that concern my case, particularly from the written statement of Mr. Kite.
Yeah.
And some comments made in relation to delivery or the need and policy to deliver, and some points made about some of the sites. Now, I've got some questions to Mr. Collins about that in due course. But I just think, having heard, I don't want it to be said I haven't picked up some points. But it's that SANGs are one of those bits of evidence which dealt with a little bit by Mr. Collins, a little bit here. Sure. There's some contentions made here about certain aspects which I would want to challenge. I can do that through Mr. Collins. It might be sensible if I had 5 minutes with this witness as well, but I hadn't flagged that up before. It's really not relating to his proof. It's about the attached written statement to his proof, which he's made comments on in his evidence in chief just then. So it may be that if I speak to my learned friends over lunch to tell them what I have in mind, and we can come back to you afterwards, but I just wanted to flag that up now.
Let's pick it up after lunch. But I mean, certainly, if it's a matter you're going to be putting to another witness, it obviously overlaps. I mean, I'm more than happy for it to be flagged up here and then put in more substance later on.
Exactly. It's just, and to be fairness, Mr. Collins, he might have said, well, okay, that's a SANG issue. You should have raised that with Mr. Jack. So it's unclear. They sort of slightly cross over from policy to position. It's only about 5 minutes, but I'll mention it to my learned friends and we can come to a view.
Have a talk over the lunch break, and we can pick that up afterwards. And obviously, questions, I'm sure, from the Rule 6 party. So 215, please. You know the drill, I'm sure.
Yes. My distance. Is this something?